Hello and welcome to Atop the Fourth Wall, where bad comics burn. But we're not talking about bad comics today. Mostly. It's time again for a retrospective. And you know, I get requests for stuff to cover for retrospectives all the time. But the thing about my retrospectives is that I do them on comics that are personally important to me, especially in how I got to be a comic book reader. This is again one of those cases where I have to remind you all of the old web. Back in the late 90s and early 2000s, the environment for online media was very different. DVDs were still a new invention, and we hadn't quite gotten things down yet for an entire series to be released on home media in a readily available, easy-to-purchase package. Media piracy back then was just as much about trying to see stuff that just wasn't available in any legal format. Even YouTube didn't exist yet. For instance, I watched a fan-subbed version of Sailor Stars that I had to download in multiple chunks on real player format in maybe 240p, because basically that was the only way they could host long-form video. The technology just wasn't there yet. Hell, for space-saving reasons on my hard drive, I had to delete most of the episodes I downloaded after watching just so I could be ready for the next files. Out of curiosity, I did check and see if I still had some of them, and indeed I do. They were like 18 megabytes per file, downloaded in October of the year 2000. The old web was wild, my friends. Anyway, where I'm going with this is that I did not have access to the original Generation One Transformers series, and I didn't know where to pirate them from. The show was before my time, starting a few years before I was born. I grew up in the 90s with Beast Wars and Beast Machines, and regardless of your feelings about either series, they spoke of the events of the G1 Transformers with reverence, calling it the Great War, and the presence of anything related to the old show was full of intrigue and mystery and just this wonderful sense of awe at what the show was like. Probably would have had a different reaction if I knew about the time Blitzwing tried to recruit a football coach in an attempt to take over the Decepticons. And as a kid who wanted to learn more about this stuff, to see the Great War in action, there was nothing I could really do about it. I got lucky and saw a handful of episodes, got the movie, but beyond that, nothing. However, one day while surfing various parts of the web, I came across a website that housed scans of every single Marvel Generation One Transformers issue. These comics are the Transformers story in their purest, rawest form, aside from the little tech spec blurbs on the back of the toys. Marvel Comics is basically responsible for everything about this franchise. Let's back up a bit and explain how we got here. In 1983, toy manufacturer Takara had a number of different toy lines revolving around transformation. Hasbro liked them and bought the rights to create the toys in America and united these lines all under the moniker The Transformers, hence why the franchise simultaneously has robots that change into jets and trucks, while also having ones that shrink down into cassette players and microscopes. And a UFO. Earlier, when Hasbro was trying to revitalize the G.I. Joe toy line, which up to that point was mostly known for being about generic military figures, they had tapped Marvel to create an entire new setting and concept for the toys, resulting in the franchise pretty much as it's known today. Real American Hero, Cobra, etc. And thus Marvel was brought in to do the same with the Transformers, with Jim Shooter and Dennis O'Neil coming up with the overall concept, while Bob Budiansky would create a lot of the names of the characters. And since G.I. Joe had had a successful comic line, why not give one for Transformers as well? And it technically predated the original TV show. Sure, in development at the same time, but this got released first. Now, I need to make it clear here, this retrospective is only concerned with the US series. Nothing against fans of the UK issues, but one, my retrospectives are on the stuff that informed me as a comic book fan, and it was the US issues that were relevant, and two, I'm already covering 40 comics today. I'd rather not do 166 if I can avoid it. So how did things start off for these robots in disguise? Is this series still as endearing and engrossing for me as a bitter, cynical adult as it was when I was a naive, optimistic teenager? Well, let's dig into Marvel's The Transformers number 1 to 40 and roll out, and one shall stand and light our darkest hour. And you've got the touch, and I think you got the idea.
Atop the fourth wall, where bad comics burn. Linkara's gonna teach you all a lesson you won't learn. What's with these awkward subjects? A universe in flux, Linkara. This comic sucks, Linkara.
Naturally, this will be a lot of summarizing with little to no discussions of dialogue. Well, maybe when we get to Simon Furman stuff, but that's a long ways off. Bob Budiansky was the main writer of the book for most of its run, but the first 4 issues were split between Bill Mantlo and Jim Salicrup. Bill doing the first 2 and Jim handling issues 3 and 4. Because, 40 comics, not gonna look at a lot of the covers. But some of these have become iconic in their own right, and referenced several times over the years. So I'll try to talk about those as we come across them. We begin, of course, with the very first issue, wherein a very chunky, stiff Optimus Prime is crushing a Decepticon in one of his fists, attached to his very stubby arms. One shall stand, one shall fall! Also, gotta love the giant heads of young Hal Holbrook and Haley Joel Osment in the back there. Who are you? I'm Ray. Ray who? Ray Transformers. And as you can see on top, this is number 1 in a 4-issue limited series. Yeah, truth be told, it's just these 4 single comics that I'm doing a retrospective on. Somehow, I'll fit them into 3 episodes. Circling the star Alpha Centauri ages ago was a planet unlike any other in the heavens.
Everything's on a cob! The whole planet's on a cob! Go! Go!
Cybertron. No rock or soil or sand contributed to its bizarre geography. Its content was entirely mechanical. Eat it, geology! My planet is made of robots! Joking aside, the narrator does acknowledge that the planet, about the size of Saturn, has origins that are long since forgotten, so it's likely it's not a natural phenomenon. I mean, why a planet would just form with mechanisms is improbable to the point of impossibility, but suspension of disbelief and all. Anyway, robotic life evolved on it. The Autobots. And everything was peaceful and prosperous, and there were no wars or traffic accidents. And then the Decepticons showed up, led by Megatron. Some really fun early installment weirdness here is that aside from Soundwave, the microcassette Ravage is also there. And he talks. Yes, as we've seen a handful of times on the show, while in the cartoon it was only really Rumble and Frenzy who talked from Soundwave's Legion, in the comics they pretty much all talked. And do more than that, as we'll see. Just another piece of evidence of how Soundwave's superior. Megatron says their deal is that peace has brought stagnation to Cybertron, and during the centuries they've been gathering their forces and readying an arsenal. Even the transformation process itself is so that they can become more powerful weapons. And apparently the war that followed was so bad that Cybertron itself was flung from its orbit. It's gonna turn out that this isn't Alpha Centauri, but the SETI Alpha system, and their war is what screwed over Khan and Star Trek. Don't tell me it couldn't happen. Star Trek and Transformers are totally in the same continuity. Reviewed that one last year.
Soon, we Decepticons will have ground our enemies under our heel, and we shall begin our prime task, rebuilding Cybertron into a cosmic dreadnought. We shall turn our very planet into the single most deadly weapon in existence. It shall become some kind of Death Star or something. Ravage, start working on a name for it.
To counter Megatron, a new leader of the Autobots arose, Optimus Prime, who apparently used to be a massive combat vehicle. For over 1,000 years, the war raged. Eventually, Cybertron's flight through space put it directly on course for a dense asteroid belt that would annihilate the planet when they reached it. As such, Optimus volunteered to lead an expedition to clear a path through it, despite the risk of the Decepticons attacking their exposed ship, the Ark. Ravage overhears all this and informs Megatron.
See that you never waver, Master of Stealth. All too often, the nature of the spy is to weigh his loyalties and switch when he feels the time is right.
It definitely worked for him when he showed up in Beast Wars. The Autobots are successful, but the Decepticons launch their attack on the Ark. With their resources drained from clearing the asteroid, the Decepticons make short work of their forces. Fortunately, Optimus anticipated this possibility, so he made sure the ship was pre-programmed with an alternate path to ensure that they and the ship never fall into Decepticon hands, sending them on a suicide run at a planet nearby, Earth. However, instead of blowing up on impact, they crash land inside of a dormant volcano. That wakes up 4 million years later in 1984.
I knew it! Big Brother is Megatron!
The volcanic blast accidentally reactivates some of the Ark's systems, in particular a probe that gets sent out to gather data back to the Ark. Since the Transformers weren't really used to organic life, the probe doesn't really detect carbon-based life forms as life, and only detects sophisticated machinery like jets as indigenous life to Earth. After learning about various devices and vehicles, the probe returns to the Ark and begins reviving everyone in the craft. The ship's systems were damaged and thus cannot distinguish friend or foe, reviving the Autobots and Decepticons simultaneously and augmenting them so they'll transform into the machines of Earth to help the robots survive. You'd think they'd immediately start fighting each other again, but after a roll call on the Decepticon side, including the 3-jet Skywarp Thundercracker Starscream, of course his awesomeness Soundwave with tapes Buzzsaw, Laserbeak, Rumble, Frenzy, and Ravage, Megatron elects for them to flee. Thing is, they're few in number and don't have many resources. If their attack on the Autobots should fail, they're screwed. Best to regroup elsewhere and figure out the situation. On the Autobot side, we've got Ironhide, Huffer, Bumblebee, Sunstreaker, Cliffjumper, Brawn, Sideswipe, Mirage, Bluestreak, Prowl, Jazz, Hound, Windcharger, Gears, Ratchet, Wheeljack, and Trailbreaker. And most of those names you could just forget about because they're not going to be important for 80 issues. Yeah, I do wonder what the logic was in just having so many characters. Maybe it was just the insistence of having the entire toy line represented, which is not helped when we start introducing more and more Transformers into the mix. Optimus acknowledges that after 4 million years, Cybertron may not even exist anymore, so their priority for the time being is to safeguard this world, especially all the life on it, from the threat the Decepticons pose. It's here where we're introduced to our first recurring human characters, Buster and his father, Sparkplug Witwicky. Of course, in the cartoon, he was known as Spike, but it's a little more complicated. See, there were 3 names being considered for this character early in production: Buster, Spike, and Butch. According to Jim Shooter, they had settled on Spike, but the cartoon producers thought the name was too aggressive, so they went with Buster. And then the cartoon went and used Spike anyway. They'd later just explain that Spike is Buster's brother who's away at college. In the meantime, Sparkplug is a mechanic who's upset that his son is wasting all his daggun time doing something as pointless as reading and trying to get a scholarship to college. Why can't he do something more useful and fix cars? Still, he's not going to force him to do anything he doesn't want to. He's just worried about his career aspects in the future and all. He lets his son take the car out to a drive-in theater with his friends, and what a coinkydink! That's where an Autobot scouting party soon finds a bunch of cars and wants to make contact. The Decepticons, spotting them, don't want them to forge an alliance with the people of Earth, especially since the planet is rich in fuel resources, and thus they attack. In the ensuing fight, or just because he's really clumsy, Bumblebee gets damaged. Buster gets into him and drives away to safety as the other Autobots soon realize that the humans fleeing the battle are, in fact, the inhabitants of Earth. Buster brings Bumblebee back to his dad's garage, who's at first ecstatic that his son is taking an interest in mechanical stuff, until he tells him how Bumblebee is alive. Help me, please! I'm dying! This is a weird remake of Herbie the Love Bug. Issue 2 begins with the Decepticons realizing the humans are indeed the dominant life form on Earth, but also setting up the Megatron and Starscream dynamic. Starscream is much sneakier about his attempts to undermine Megatron's authority. Megatron, for instance, is very much a brute force, full frontal attack sort, while Starscream prefers being cautious, scout things out, and get as much information as possible first. Megatron knows that Starscream is attempting to usurp him, but knows that he has good ideas too, so he's not just going to disregard anything he says. Anyway, they launch an attack on a nuclear plant under construction and pilfer it for technology and resources. Meanwhile, Sparkplug is disbelieving Buster's story, but does repair Bumblebee enough to the point where he's able to transform and confirm what's up. Eventually, they make contact with Optimus and offer to figure out a way to convert standard gasoline into something the Autobots can use. And indeed, Optimus and the other Autobots show up at the garage. Those cars don't have any drivers in them, Mitchell. Sparky probably developed some kind of remote control device, Doris. You know, like that one kid we heard about who built one into a silver dollar. Come to think of it, I think that's his truck out there. The Decepticons, however, learned about this thanks to Ravage and Attack, getting away with Sparkplug as their prisoner so he can convert fuel for them instead. The Autobots want to pursue, but they're low on fuel and collapse. Man, the Autobots are in a tight spot. It's a shame this isn't canon to the Marvel Universe like Rom was, or else a superhero like Spider-Man could show up. Anyway, in issue 3, Spider-Man shows up. Yeah, I've mentioned this before, and it was especially relevant to the Retrospective. Marvel had this tendency to make their licensed tie-in comics canon to the Marvel Universe. They evidently had the same idea for the Transformers, and issue 3 is stuffed full of references to the larger Marvel Universe. And honestly, connecting them did make sense when this was just a 4-issue miniseries. The problem is that there comes a point where the story grows so big that it becomes untenable for both to exist at once. After all, where was Optimus Prime during Secret Wars? Why weren't the Avengers actively trying to stop the Decepticons as they grew more powerful? It just doesn't really work. Rom got away with it because the Dire Wraiths were acting in secret, and most of Rom's interactions with humans for a good chunk of his series were with the normal residents of a single town or a few lesser-known heroes. The Autobot and Decepticon war on Earth is not the kind of thing that the larger Marvel Universe could be ignoring, and Cybertron drifting through space for 4 million years would have undoubtedly run across more alien races from the Marvel Universe that would cause issues. Maybe you could make it work if you planned it out in advance and really put a lot of thought into how you could incorporate the two things together, but this was the mid-80s. Event comics weren't even really a thing yet. Secret Wars was still going on at the time, so big planning on incorporating this book and its future into the Marvel Universe was just not in the cards. Although it's amusing that Hasbro didn't even want Spider-Man in this book, Marvel was the one pushing it. Hasbro disagreed because Spidey's toy rights were tied up with Mattel at the time. They compromised by having Spidey appear here in the black symbiote costume, since it was the regular Spider-Man outfit that Mattel was selling at the time. And of course, the rights issues with this caused more problems down the line. This IDW trade that reprinted the first 16 Marvel Transformers books had to omit issue 3 and just summarize what happened in the issue, even repainting him on the cover so it was just a solid black outfit. Which is kind of ironic because Spidey did once wear an all-black costume and called himself Dusk. Anyway, Sparkplug is brought to the Decepticons' fortress, constructed out of the dismantled nuclear plant, a fact that Sparkplug has deduced and realizes just how little the Decepticons understand Earth's primitive technology. He tries to just give name, rank, and serial number, as he once had to as a POW in the Korean War, but Megatron just threatens to kill him if he doesn't cooperate. Meanwhile, the Autobots have to withdraw to the Ark to try to refuel, as crowds and police have now seen the battle between the two robot forces. Well, hey, why don't they ask Ulysses Solomon Archer back there to help? I'm sure he could whip up something just as good, if not better, than Sparkplug. And yeah, that is a legit cameo by US One back there. This was printed around its 10th or 11th issue, if I'm not mistaken. And now I just want a US One and Transformers crossover. Why not? They're crossing over with everything else nowadays. Sparkplug finally agrees to help and has the Decepticons acquire a bunch of stuff for him to help build the converter. The government soon takes notice of them and the giant fortress the Decepticons have built, the army and reporters soon traveling to the scene. S.H.I.E.L.D. even sees this.
We gotta check out what's going on in Oregon, Nicholas. Dum-dum, if that big green fire-snorting lizard is loose again, I quit.
Oh yeah, another licensed book thrown in there. S.H.I.E.L.D. dealt with Godzilla once. Dr. Linksano made a video about those comics a few years ago. Oh my god, why have we not had Transformers vs. Godzilla? Honestly, given these connections, I'm shocked Rom doesn't make a cameo or anything here. Anyway, with reporters at the scene, we of course have Peter Parker, who had apparently ditched the symbiote by this point, so they required an editor's note to say this took place before then. That's especially goofy since, as I said, Secret Wars was still being published at this point, and his costume change had already been undone in the main books. Whoops. This costume's quite a time saver. All I have to do is think about changing, and it takes care of the rest. If only I could solve all my problems as easily. Yeah, like the problem of where the hell you're shooting that web line to, Pete. You're in the middle of a desert with no large trees or anything around. After a brief bit of standard two heroes meeting each other misunderstanding bit with the Autobot gears, Spidey teams up with our heroes to try to get them clearance through to attack the Decepticons. His brilliant plan? Steal an army man's helmet and drive Huffer through in the lead to make it look like he's in the army and acting under orders to go to the front, making no effort to disguise himself in any other way. This plan actually works.
You magnificent bastard, I read your book!
They managed to get Sparkplug out, but it seems he succeeded in building a fuel converter, demonstrated in issue 4 by Megatron stepping outside to confront the army, whose weapons do nothing to him, and he just steps back inside to show how much they don't matter to him. Starscream tries another attempt to undermine Megatron here, but Megatron has finally had enough and blasts him for this.
Despite his treasonous tone, Starscream had a point. Ravage, go to the Ark and report back to me on the Autobots' progress.
Well, at least he acknowledges my good ideas. Better than my last corporate job.
Since we're still in the Marvel Universe at this point, the Autobots learned that their probes did actually detect another Cybertronian on Earth a few million years ago, the Decepticon Shockwave, and he actually took up residence in the Savage Land. And in fact, the Ark's defensive systems found out Shockwave's presence and constructed 5 new Autobots to go deal with him based on the life forms in the Savage Land, the Dinobots. This is ridiculous on like 50 different levels. 1. Wasn't the Ark's friend or foe sensors disabled in the crash? How did it know Shockwave was an enemy? 2. Why did Shockwave travel all the way to the Savage Land, which is in Antarctica? Even if he was breaking off from Megatron's forces, surely he would have found someplace more suitable. 3. How did the probe determine that the dinosaurs were life forms when before it could only register mechanical objects as life? 4. Why did it not just revive the Autobots instead of building 5 new robots? 5. How did it build 5 new robots when the Autobots are so low on resources they're hoping a human can convert fossil fuels to them?
It just raises too many questions.
Oh, but the Ark's automated systems do them one better, because they detect a new signal from Antarctica that it just automatically sends out a probe to excavate the source of the signal, and awakens Shockwave, who comes and blasts both the Autobots and the disabled Decepticons. Yeah, the fuel process Sparkplug came up with actually slowly sabotaged them. Admittedly, we can forgive some of this because this leads us into issue 5's cover, which is one of the best and most remembered of the series. Take a look at that! Bold move for them once the miniseries got upgraded into an ongoing series to just start off by saying, they're all dead! Also, apparently the Transformers logo is diegetic, otherwise Shockwave just randomly burned into a wall, are all dead. And right next to the graffiti that informs us that there was a hole here, but it's gone now. Unlike the loyal servant that Shockwave was on the show, dutifully trying to call Megatron for 4 million years without success, here Shockwave has decided that Megatron is an inferior leader to him, since he follows pure logic, and thus he's assuming command.
There is logic in what he says.
We do learn that Shockwave was not on the Ark when everything went down, but rather followed them to Earth. Though that does now raise the question of why he didn't just leave when he couldn't find them. Still, in any case, Megatron bides his time to resume command. Shockwave has reasoned that Optimus Prime contains the Creation Matrix, which instead of being a kind of vague, quasi-mystical force like would later be shown in the movie, the Creation Matrix is instead the method by which its possessor can construct new Transformer life. Which, again, raises even more questions about how the Ark made the Dinobots, but whatever. Shockwave plans to use the Matrix to create a new army of Decepticons to rule Earth. Fortunately, the Autobots have an outside ally. Ratchet wasn't taken with the others due to another subplot, so he and Buster are able to sneak in, though Optimus has been decapitated.
Buster Witwicky, you must help me. You are the Autobots' last hope. Can you scratch my nose? I have been in utter agony for hours.
Issue 6 sees Shockwave begin his plans, assaulting a new state-of-the-art oil drilling platform owned by industrialist Tony G.B. Blackrock. The platform was developed by this woman, Josie Beller. Naturally, an oil platform has a bunch of automated defense cannons, which are ineffective against him. In the attack, Blackrock tries to get everyone to evacuate, but Josie refuses to leave, and ends up massively electrocuted for her trouble. Speaking of people getting electrocuted, Optimus asks for Buster's help, saying there's no time to explain, to just take the 2 wires on his forehead and put them on either side of Buster's own head. And he gets zapped.
Oh, Buster, I forgot to tell you. Shockwave deleted my ethical subroutines. This was just a really funny prank to me. Buster? Yeah, I'll tell him again when he wakes up.
After a failed attempt by Megatron to retrieve leadership, Buster is sent back into town with some college students for safety, while Ratchet tries to figure out his next move. Shockwave uses Soundwave to secure one of BlackRock's jet manufacturing plants, while BlackRock himself works to help Josie out, whose nervous system has been fried by the electrocution. Still, she's able to move one hand and is making plans for them. Ratchet sneaks into the Ark and, after a pep talk from Optimus's head, gets into a fight with Megatron. He's clearly outgunned, but upon learning that Shockwave is now in command, he makes an offer to join forces with Megatron to take him down. Well, actually, it says, help you defend Shockwave, but I can assume that was just a typo. Otherwise, Ratchet's kind of a moron for thinking that would entice Megatron. And no, that was not corrected for the IDW reprint. Oh, and Megatron now explains why Shockwave didn't just leave right away. Passing through the radiation belt around Earth adversely affected his guidance systems, and before he could reorient himself to find the Ark, he was attacked by the Dinobots. Which, yeah, I appreciate getting answers to my questions a few issues later, but now the timescale really seems off, since how the hell were the Dinobots built so damn quickly before Shockwave could restore himself? Anyway, while Megatron is dubious that Ratchet could successfully defeat Shockwave, he does agree to Ratchet's demand that, if they're successful, he'll hand the Ark and the Autobots back over to him, even doing some super serious Cybertronian bonding ritual to prove his sincerity. Of course, these are the dudes with deception in their name, so naturally Megatron has no intention of honoring that agreement. Issue 8 sees Ratchet travel to the Savage Land and finds the Dinobots, scanning through their memories to find out how they defeated Shockwave. Short answer, rocks fall, everybody dies. While he revives the Dinobots, Shockwave moves Optimus's head to the manufacturing plant so he can create 6 new Decepticons to aid in his efforts. Josie watches all this on TV and finalizes the first part of a new enhancement, equipping cybernetic implants to her hand that allow her freedom of movement. Yes, if you're familiar with the episode I did last Christmas, this is the birth of Circuit Breaker, who will become a recurring foe throughout this book. Ratchet meets up with Megatron, who of course plans to betray him, but fortunately Ratchet anticipated that and has the Dinobots fight him. Still, Megatron's no slouch in combat, and it's only good fortune that the cliff he was on collapses and he falls down a mountain that Ratchet wins. Megatron turns into gun mode so as to save himself, though he's buried in snow and rocks. Megatron was the only one guarding the Ark, all the other Decepticons having either moved into the captured oil platform or the manufacturing plant. So Ratchet is quickly able to retake it and restore the Autobots to normal. While the Decepticons left behind some additional fuel reserves that recharge them, sadly they're in no shape to mount a rescue, as Ratchet points out. It's a bad sign for your chain of command, or just how badly they've been beaten down, that next in command status now falls to the medical officer. Needing more fuel and learning about BlackRock developing some kind of anti-robot weapon, Jazz and Wheeljack are sent to talk to BlackRock and explain the situation with the two factions, maybe make a deal with him for fuel. Speaking of, Josie reveals herself as Circuit Breaker to BlackRock, and as with the Christmas issue, I do wonder why she never bothered to figure out how to incorporate pants or even boots into all this. The suit also grants her the ability to remotely access computer files and blast electronic devices. She's also developed an electromagnetic field that allows her to fly. Seeing this impressive display, flight, restoration of full body paralysis, remote hacking tech, and all BlackRock can say is, Josie, go back to bed. BlackRock is genuinely a decent person who doesn't want Josie to get hurt again. But he's also kind of painfully stupid at times. So let's talk about Circuit Breaker for a second here, because like Spider-Man, she's a victim of the copyrighted characters problem. This isn't like ROM, where the rights are more complicated, wherein Marvel pretty much owns everything around ROM, but not ROM himself. No, this is what would normally be a thing with a licensed comic. Anything created in this comic belongs to Hasbro because it's done in the licensed book. Problem is that Bob Budiansky decided that he wanted Circuit Breaker to be a Marvel-owned character, so he arranged for Circuit Breaker to first appear in the event comic Secret Wars 2. Amusingly enough though, even though they are technically the same person, rights issues are stupid, so while Marvel owns the trademark to the Circuit Breaker character, they don't own one for Josie Beller, so Hasbro still owns her. This led to another copyright issue for these IDW reprint books. This series had been reprinted before via Titan Books for a small fee because Marvel didn't think anybody gave a crap about a stupid old toy tie-in comic. And upon discovering that, yeah, people actually give a crap about this stuff, upped the fee to ridiculous amounts when IDW decided to reprint the books. So Circuit Breaker's appearances, like Spider-Man's, had to be replaced with summaries of what happened. Except for the final volume of the book, where her presence is integral to major plot points, so they had to do it. And it's not like Marvel had any grand plans for her or have used her for anything since then. They're squatting on the license just to be greedy. Anyway, Josie's obsessed with revenge and all, but instead of trying to placate her a little bit, saying, yes, we can use this tech to gain your revenge, but it also has limitless other possibilities, and you should still spend more time testing and recovering before we try to send you into battle, BlackRock's just, nah, you'll get hurt. What's especially amusing is that he is a capitalist. The army actually stopped by to ask him not to unveil a new anti-robot cannon he's developing because they still suspect a foreign power is behind the Transformers, and they want to deal with this as a national security matter, but BlackRock was only concerned with his shareholders getting pissed about him looking like he's not doing anything to fight them. Jazz makes contact with him and he agrees to their deal, but at the unveiling of the anti-robot cannon, Circuit Breaker disrupts its electronics so it won't work.
As someone who hates robots, I am infuriated that BlackRock built this anti-robot cannon!
Yeah, she wants to be his secret weapon to fight them, but still, seems like a dumb move on her part. The Decepticons attack and Jazz tries to help, but despite BlackRock's pleas, Circuit Breaker sees all the Transformers as equally bad. After the Decepticons retreat, he does finally get her to stop attacking Jazz and Wheeljack, but only out of respect to BlackRock for his want to make up for what happened to her. She makes it clear that next time she encounters them, she won't hesitate to kill them all. Well, unless it's Christmas. Optimus zapping Buster was actually him implanting the creation matrix into his body, which he's been using unintentionally to have telekinetic abilities and minor psychic powers. However, before the matrix was transferred, Shockwave used it to instill life into 6 brain modules. And with the manufacturing plant in his control, Shockwave in issue 10 has created the Constructicons, aka the first Combiner team, all 6 joining together to form their own Megazord named Devastator. Oh, and once again, as a reminder that just because BlackRock is a good guy doesn't mean he isn't also, well, a bit of a douchebag rich guy. He informs the Autobots that he bugged the phones at the plant. I devised the system to improve security there. Make sure no one was saying anything they shouldn't. You know, things like, we should unionize, or for the love of God, can I go to the bathroom? The Decepticons are able to briefly transmit a message to Cybertron about their situation, and in issue 11 find out that Buster has the creation matrix within him. Shockwave wants to use it for a new Transformer, Jetfire, which currently is assembled, but it has no brain, so it just obeys simple commands. As such, he dispenses Jetfire out to grab Buster, but the lack of a mind means that Buster can disassemble it at will with the power of the creation matrix. Which he does so. He then reassembles it, and with Bumblebee's help, reprograms Jetfire to obey him. In issue 12, Buster is inadvertently knocked out and brought back to the plant, where Shockwave hooks him up to a machine to utilize the creation matrix. Fortunately, since he still has control over Jetfire, he uses it to take Optimus's head back to the Autobots, restoring their beloved leader. I would just like to note that for about 7 or 8 issues, more than half a year's worth of stories, and more than half of this book's existence up to this point, Optimus has only been a head and a prisoner of the bad guys. Shockwave is dumped into a swamp, and Optimus doesn't kill him despite having the chance because he wants to go and help Buster. And he doesn't order the other Autobots to do it because, well, again, he's only been a head for a while now. Dude's still getting his footing. Buster transferred the creation matrix back into Optimus. Meanwhile, issue 13 brings us a done-in-one, sorta filler issue where a criminal finds Megatron in gun mode. His higher brain functions were damaged from the fall in the snow and rocks, so he does whatever he's ordered to do, something the criminal takes advantage of to try to improve his life, only to find that being a crime boss isn't really all it's cracked up to be. Tossing Megatron aside apparently is all it takes to fix his brain. The dude stands up for himself to Megatron when he threatens to kill him, which amuses him that somebody could be so brave.
It is deserving of Megatron's respect, not his wrath. Unfortunately, while Megatron can now think properly again, Megatron can only speak in the third person now.
Issue 14 begins with Jetfire given a full mind, wherein he officially joins the Autobots. A lot of them have been severely damaged from the recent fight, Ratchet saying that they lack a lot of spare parts necessary to repair them, although that might be because the Ark, once again, builds new Transformers! Well, sort of. The bodies are new, but the minds are not. Copies of warriors Optimus knew back on Cybertron. This is what happens when your ship has a promote new toys subroutine in it. BlackRock and the Navy set up a blockade around the stolen oil rig to try to contain the Decepticons, who were having issues with leadership after Shockwave was dropped into the swamp.
Shockwave has abandoned us! We've been here for weeks awaiting his next order! If he won't command the Decepticons, then I will!
Honestly, it's just kind of surprising that it's taken weeks for Starscream to finally declare himself the new leader. I would have expected that within an hour of not hearing anything from Shockwave. Shockwave soon returns, and he's been busy, having developed the energy converter that Sparkplug was supposed to build. The device is relatively portable, so they don't need to be stationed out of the oil rig anymore. They can use it to draw out energy from any fuel source and convert it to energon cubes for their use. They head off to steal energy from a nearby concert being done by Brick Springhorn and the 10th Avenue Band. I was never into them. I much preferred Doctrine Dirty Water Resurrection. The Decepticons were even able to harness the energy of sound into cubes, but fortunately our heroes routed them, even destroyed the energy converter. This brings us to issue 15. As I mentioned earlier, the Army asked BlackRock not to talk about the anti-robot weapon. The government is worried about the panic that would erupt if they knew that giant robots were waging a war all around them and had no way of stopping them. The fictional Intelligence and Information Institute, or 3I, is summoned to try to work out a way to suppress public knowledge about them.
I'm the government, I'm the government, I'm the reason nothing works.
BlackRock is also brought in, and he starts to explain the whole Autobots and Decepticons thing, but they're not interested in hearing about distinguishing between the two sides, or hearing what else he has to say about the forces they have been trying to figure out.
An intelligence organization that fears intelligence, historically not awesome.
Getting inspiration from a Robot Master comic book that his son has, one of the agents of 3I hires the writer of that comic to come up with a plausible backstory to the Transformers that they can feed to the public. I know they're just being meta here, but really all I'm thinking is, man, the movie Wag the Dog was great, but what if the fake story they had in that involved giant robots? The writer comes up with a human villain, Robot Master, who claims to be behind the robot attacks. He's played by the comic writer himself in order to reduce the amount of people who are in on the scheme. And now I just wish that the writer they had gotten was Alan Moore. Would have made the dude a wizard too. Unfortunately, the Decepticons, while at first pissed about all this, decide to take advantage of this to help turn humanity against the Autobots. Megatron rejoins forces with Soundwave during this, making his own plans to finally retake his forces from Shockwave. Issue 16 is a standalone story mostly for Bumblebee's character development. The conflict of him not being sure if he belongs with the Autobots or not kinda comes out of nowhere and it gets fairly easily resolved, so we'll move on to issue 17, where the action cuts back to Cybertron. The Decepticons have taken over most of the planet, and it's a hellhole now. A severe lack of resources and a lot of the regular population of Cybertronians are in disrepair and lacking energy. Just to add to the dark prospects of this world, there's a massive smelting pool that the Decepticons use to melt down Cybertronians to use for raw materials. There's an Autobot resistance led by the microscope I mentioned at the start, Perceptor, though the rest of the group tends to have more respect for Blaster, Soundwave's Autobot counterpart, who turns into a whole stereo as opposed to just a cassette player. Which you'd think I'd be all over given my love of Soundwave, but I don't know, Blaster's fine, but there's something about Soundwave that just makes him infinitely cooler. Maybe it's the voice. Issue 17's a great tragic story about an Autobot who dies retrieving a copy of the signal the Decepticons got. The message from Earth informing their homeworld of their circumstances. Issue 18 sees the Cybertronian Decepticons working on developing the Space Bridge, a way to instantaneously transport their forces between the two planets. In the TV show, the Space Bridge was essentially a big teleporter. In the comic, it's literally a bridge, one half of it on Cybertron, the other on Earth that you pass through an archway to end up on the other side. Shockwave and Megatron receive a return signal from Cybertron and inform them of the Space Bridge, so they put aside their rivalry for the time being in order to secure their reinforcements. The Autobot resistance manages to disable the bridge and accidentally cross over to Earth. We enter issue 19 with the Autobots having finished construction of Omega Supreme, an even bigger robot that can defend the Ark while they launch an attack on the Decepticons to try to gain information about Devastator and the Combiner's process. Unfortunately, the Dinobots are annoyed by Prime. Since he doesn't want to piss off the humans, they try to minimize open warfare with the Decepticons, and even when they launch an assault like this, Prime doesn't want to do anything more than retrieve information to avoid Autobot casualties. As such, the Dinobots leave, thinking their role of being warriors is wasted.
Me, Grimlock, want to fight Decepticons! Why you leave to go fight Decepticons when me could be fighting Decepticons?
They're successful in their mission, Omega Supreme even downing 6 Decepticons that launched a vain attempt at taking the Ark. In the meantime, Robot Master, aka Donnie Finkelberg, has escaped from the Decepticons and hopes to warn our heroes about the space bridge. In issue 20, the only Autobot casualty of the attack, Skids, gets picked up by a woman who's an Old West enthusiast who wants to make him into her new car. Skids eventually reveals himself to her and wants to stay out of the war. He's an anthropologist, not a soldier, and is happy to just keep being her car if it means studying humanity. Studying humanity apparently includes getting washed by her in a tight t-shirt and cutoffs, so I guess Michael Bay did adapt some things accurately. Skids eventually learns that he has to play his part in the war, though admittedly it kinda comes across as douchey. Like it or not, each of us has a role in life. We can't deny it. We can only try to make the best of it. You are a cashier. I am an Autobot warrior. Sorry, Charlene, but to think you could be anything else but a cashier means you're living in a dream world. Best to just settle for what you got, loser. Issue 21 reveals that the Decepticons have finished repairs on the space bridge, so they start working on getting fuel resources again to send back to Cybertron, taking control of Hoover Dam and siphoning power from it. With their information on the Combiner technology, our heroes have constructed their own, the Aerial Bots, who quickly arrive to save the dam, forming into Superion. Meanwhile, Finkelberg makes contact with the Autobots and informs them of what's been going on, including of the Autobots from Cybertron who arrived. Unfortunately, we learn at the end of the issue that the 4 were already captured by RAT, the government's new task force, short for Rapid Anti-Robot Assault Team, which really means that their name should be RARAT, but why would we ever want to break away from such a great acronym as RAT? And their leader, who has decapitated them all, Circuit Breaker. Issue 22 begins with a breakdown of what happened exactly, and it seems that the guy who hired Finkelberg for 3i is starting to wonder if maybe BlackRock was correct, seeing as the Autobots weren't being aggressive when they encountered them and, well, Circuit Breaker's kinda cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. Through shenanigans, mostly from the Decepticons managing to plant a bug inside of Optimus's head, they're able to duplicate the creation matrix when Optimus uses it to refine the programming of the Aerial Bots to give life to another Combiner team, the Stunticons. This is what I mean when I say that the book loves to introduce new characters all the time. I really do wonder how much of this is Hasbro coming down and saying, hey, promote this new toy this month, or just the creators wanting to play around with new groups of characters while sidelining old ones. Donnie, frightened by all the combat and action, plus Optimus holding his wallet with a $25,000 check from 3i hostage for his cooperation, turns in Skids for a mission they were on to investigate the missing Autobots. He, like the Aerial Bots and the 7 from Cybertron, is captured by RAT. However, in issue 23, even he's having doubts about all this, as Circuit Breaker is deconstructing the captured Autobots and somewhat torturing them in the process. Nice of her to label the different Autobots on their slabs, though. In the meantime, Megatron wants to challenge Optimus Prime to a battle to the death, and thus brings in 2 new toys to promote, Runabout and Runamuck, to find some way of dramatically making the challenge, as opposed to Soundwave just, calling the Ark like he suggests. The 2 get inspired by a kid doing the most heinous of activities, graffiti! You monster! Did you learn nothing from the Tandy Computer Whiz Kids? I mean, what would even compel you to say something as vile and disgusting as, vacations are the pits? Huh. Another example of the ongoing struggle of graffiti, fun or dumb. This leans on the dumb. So, yeah, they follow this family as they go on their vacation across the country and write Cybertronian graffiti all over America, meaning no one can understand what the hell it is they're writing. Fortunately, we've contacted some other aliens to translate.
It just says, Dear Freezer, and it's a picture of a butt.
After figuring out where they'll hit next, Circuit Breaker and Rat intercept the two, but when Circuit Breaker forgets to clear the area of civilians before engaging them, she's temporarily relieved of command. Admittedly, Circuit Breaker didn't intend to put civilians in harm's way and actually gets injured saving a little kid, but clearly her judgment is in question. Finkelberg, wanting out of this whole thing, especially because of his guilt, suggests that instead of relying on the resources of Rat to deal with the two Decepticons, she make a deal with the Autobot bodies she's got lying around. They're in too many pieces to repair in the short time they have, but her ability to interface with electronics gives her the ability to control their bodies, which they jury-rig into some kind of weird Gestalt robot. The final target, the Statue of Liberty, gets graffitied in English this time. Humans are wimps. My God, Decepticons, at long last, have you no sense of decency? Circuit Breaker is able to destroy them, but the Autobots couldn't be fully controlled by her. She needed to actually make a deal for their cooperation. Said deal being that she let them go once they had completed the mission. However, releasing the Autobots was a step too far from the guy from 3i, so the two are fired from Rat. Circuit Breaker is pissed that the deal has cost her this much, and really goes to show how short their thinking is, since they could still keep her around as an asset even if she isn't in charge. But Finkelberg is just happy to be going home. However, upon hearing that renovations to the Statue of Liberty over the graffiti will cost up to $60,000, he decides to donate his entire paycheck from Rat as restitution for his part in all this. Dude, this part wasn't in any way your fault, and they'll fix the statue regardless, trust me. Just keep the money or use it to buy housing for the homeless or something. Oh, and never mind about that whole wanting to fight in single combat plot point for Megatron. I guess he got bored and decided not to do it. Unfortunately, that brings us to issue 24. I've actually done a review of this before as a live show a couple of times, because this issue is kind of infamous. It's the one where Optimus Prime elects to commit suicide over winning a video game. Yeah. And the most baffling part is, this is actually a kind of integral story issue. To summarize, because honestly at some point I should just convert the live show into a proper episode, this is on the level of the Car Wash of Doom of infamous stories, which, yeah, we'll be skimming that one again because it falls under today's purview. The Decepticons attack an experimental new power plant to steal energy, but the Autobots arrive to stop them, having found the bug planted in Optimus and reversed the signal to monitor them instead. Because their fight would destroy the plant itself, the sole remaining worker in the plant, a video game enthusiast, suggests plugging all their brains into a video game and duking it out virtually, with victory achieved by destroying the leader of their opposing side. What's more, whoever loses will get destroyed. And yet this is still the best version of any of those movies that go, you die in the game, you die for realsies. While Optimus is victorious, he had to kill some of the NPCs in the game to win. He sees this as a violation of his principles, since if this was the real world, killing innocents to win his war would be just as shameful, and thus he is the true loser. This is utter bullcrap! While I get Optimus's point, the nature of this particular battle is that it isn't real people, that these NPCs are not alive in even the most rudimentary sense. You're allowed to cut loose and do things you couldn't normally do so as to not cause real harm. Otherwise, this gives the unintentional message, oh, you kill people in a video game but not in real life? You might as well be a murderer! And that would be especially awkward for me, given how my Hitman streams ended. Stop spreading the infection! Stop spreading the infection!
I was gonna say, when he's being nonsense, it sounds like he's basically Swedish Chef.
Yeah.
What's more, even if I did agree with Optimus's position on this, he still fulfilled the parameters of the game and defeated the enemy leader, so Megatron should still get fried too, and the Decepticons should walk away with nothing. But no, Optimus insists that he die, and the Decepticons truly won. Optimus, gets blowed up. Remember how many little kids got traumatized by Transformers the movie? This comic was released a month after the film, and this seems like it'd be even worse if kids read this, because now you've got little kids going, can't play video games anymore, they're what killed Optimus Prime! Buddy Ansky said later that he was just trying to illustrate Optimus's high moral standards, but recognizes that he took it to an absurd extreme. He always intended to bring him back, which is more than the intentions of the movie, but still, just to add another layer of insanity to this whole thing, the guy who insisted on all this, Ethan Zachary, he made a backup of Optimus's brain and has stored it on a 5¼ inch floppy disk. I'd like to note that, at best, a 5¼ inch floppy disk has a maximum storage capacity of 1.2 megabytes. And honestly, you can kind of believe that Optimus's brain is that size given this story. Remember what I said at the beginning of all this? 1/3 of a low-resolution copy of a Sailor Moon episode took up more hard drive space than Optimus Prime's brain! And hell, bear in mind that Optimus isn't even the average Transformer. He's got the creation matrix in him too. Oh yeah, and thanks Optimus, you've doomed your race to slow extinction because that's gone now too. God, are we sure that when they found the bug in his brain from before, they didn't actually cause some brain damage? Ugh. So in between issues, they actually had a crossover miniseries between G.I. Joe and Transformers. Not the last that they'd ever have, of course, where the Decepticons team up with Cobra. In issue 25, it gets a mention, but the only actually relevant thing to come out of that is that Bumblebee got destroyed and rebuilt into Goldbug, as he did at the end of season 3 of the cartoon. Beyond that, it can be completely ignored, so we're doing just that. The army has decided to launch a full-scale attack on the Decepticons' base in a coal mine pit. Megatron, however, is distracted. He didn't get satisfaction from Optimus's destruction, and in fact is beginning to wonder if he's dead at all, because he didn't squeeze the life out of him like he does to a Combaticon. Shockwave, realizing that Megatron's emotional instability right now can be taken advantage of, plants the idea in his head that his death was a simulation, just like the video game itself. And thus Megs goes insane and starts shooting everything in anger now that he believes Optimus is alive. And to be fair, he is, but you try telling Megatron, crush this flimsy plastic square and your enemy is gone forever. The power plant system they stole was for collecting energy from different thermal layers in the ocean, so the Decepticons quickly vacate the pit in Wyoming to relocate to Florida and gain access to the ocean. Seems like they should actually be headed to the Pacific since it's closer, but what the hell do I know? Linkara versus geography is a recurring thing on this show. Shockwave sends a secret message to another combiner team on Cybertron, the Predacons, with instructions to hunt down and kill Megatron covertly, even having them adopt Autobot symbols to seem like a sneak attack from them. They do a good job too, ripping off half his face, but he's able to overcome them. He learns that Shockwave sent them to kill him, even made a copy of his personality engrams to aid them in the fight, but realizing that that could be how Optimus survived, he goes completely mad, blasting the space bridge and seemingly destroying himself in the process, allowing Shockwave to once again take command. Issues like this really kind of explain why Galvatron was so completely bonkers. It didn't spring from nowhere. In issue 26, Ratchet tries and fails to restore the blown-up Optimus Prime, in the intermediate time having apparently restored all the Autobots taken apart by Rat. Much to his shame. Although once again, seeing all the Autobots, both newly constructed and repaired, we are reminded by a bunch of Autobots that are currently on life support that somehow they can't be restored. I have neither the equipment nor the spare parts to return them to operating status. This is Doctor Strange can't heal a bullet wound levels of bullcrap at this point. For crying out loud, the issue where Optimus died premiered another new team of combiner robots that were built off-panel. And for heaven's sakes, if you can build new robot bodies, just take their minds out of the damaged bodies and put them in the new ones! While the rest of the Autobots attend a funeral for Optimus, sending his body flying into space on a small capsule shuttle, Ratchet decides to try to find replacement parts for his comrades in a junkyard, stumbling into a car theft operation led by a villain known as the Mechanic, who is arguably either more or less pathetic than Carjack from Thunderstrike, depending on how you look at it. It's another Ratchet character-focused issue, as he once again needs to gain self-confidence in himself and all, but the hilarious thing is that it seems the spare part that he needed to get Prowl back online? Police siren lights. Yeah, beginning to think that the spare parts that Ratchet keeps saying he's lacking are actually just, like, aesthetic stuff. Like, Ironhide could be brought back online if he just had the right decal. Issue 27 brings us back to the Dinobots, who are scavenging on fuel trucks to survive on their own. Grimlock has heard of Optimus Prime's death and is quite pleased about it, since he thinks he can force his way into becoming the new leader. Meanwhile, the space bridge is repaired, but the Decepticons get a call from Ratbat. Now, normally Ratbat is one of Soundwave's cassettes, but Buddy Ansky wanted to screw with audience expectations. I mean, in a good way that's not Optimus dies because of a video game. And thus made what was normally an animalistic, non-speaking minor character into a high-ranking member of the Decepticons. Ratbat is the Decepticon fuel auditor for Cybertron, and he's informing Shockwave that they're going to be shutting down the space bridge for a while. It consumes too much power, and the Decepticons on Earth haven't provided enough fuel to justify keeping it on. He does agree to one last-ditch effort to attack the Autobots and seize the Ark, sending forth their most powerful Decepticon on Cybertron to aid in their effort. Trypticon. In theory, Trypticon is supposed to be massive, like an entire battle station or part of a city that other Transformers can ride inside of. But they've obviously scaled him down a bit. There's also a bit of a different presentation of his intelligence. The bigger the Transformer, the dumber they tend to be. Maybe their minds otherwise can't handle the enormity of their systems or something. But here, Trypticon is pretty talkative and strategic. The same can actually be said for Grimlock and the Dinobots here. While Grimlock in this story is not exactly winning people over with his intellect, he's not going around talking like the Hulk. Trypticon's attack on the Autobots disables them for a minute, but the Dinobots are able to attack it and defeat it. And as much as they had earlier rejected Grimlock's attempt at claiming leadership, during the battle, they feel he exhibited all the best qualities of leadership. Wisdom, compassion, courage, charisma, and military skill, especially after he drove off Trypticon. Ratbat forced him to retreat for expending his fuel budget for the mission. I don't know if I necessarily agree with all of that, and even Grimlock admits that his desire to be leader was selfish, but they won't be dissuaded and make him the new leader. In issue 28, though, I guess Grimlock fell over and hit his head or something, because now his speech pattern better matches the cartoons, and he's become an insufferable asshole, even picking out a crown to wear for himself. Where does that thing go when he transforms? This issue is mostly about the return of the Mechanic, who stole several Autobot weapons and tools in their last confrontation, and they're trying to retrieve them. He gets away again, and realizing that Grimlock will think they failed even though they brought down his criminal operations, Goldbug and Blaster decide to desert, bringing us to issue 29. The two meet with Blackrock and explain the situation, wanting to try to deal with Decepticons on their own. He informs them of a recent meteor crash that was emitting radio signals that could mean more Decepticons, so they head out to investigate. The meteor was actually a Decepticon ship dispatched by Ratbat, but it was infected with metal-eating parasites known as scraplets that attacked and damaged it. Ratbat dispatches 3 triple changers to Earth to investigate what happened, but they, along with Blaster and Goldbug, become infected. After some convenient exposition about a cure that might exist for them, Goldbug and a human who was investigating the crater head out to try to find it. In the next issue, Ratbat learns of the scraplet infection and decides to not risk any more Decepticons on this operation. Instead, he captures a group of Autobots known as the Throttlebots and sends them to destroy any Transformers infected with them, since otherwise the scraplets could multiply and extend beyond Earth. Given that the scraplets can exist outside of the Transformers, your plan to send more Transformers to deal with the infected seems like a bit of poor planning, dude. Soon, the human discovers what the cure is, the chemical compound thought to be so rare that its existence is suspect. Water. Friggin' water. Dihydrogen monoxide, huh? Just such a rarity in the universe. Couldn't figure that compound out, huh?
Of course! Don't you know anything about science?
After an encounter with the Throttlebots, they contact Blackrock and acquire enough water to deal with the scraplets, but Blackrock himself gets a little mind control chip shot at him by the fleeing Triple Changers. This leads us to issue 31, The Car Wash of Doom. This is actually one I did a full review of in 2013. It's also where I stupidly said in the end credits that they should just re-release the old Soundwave toy to make a lot of money, not understanding anything about the toy market, changing trends, etc. It was dumb of me. So anyway, in 2019, they reissued the original Generation One Soundwave toy as a Walmart exclusive, and I bought it. It's a funny old world, isn't it? There's not much to say about it in regards to the larger narrative going on. We get to check on Sparkplug, Buster, and his girlfriend in a fun, if goofy, adventure where it turns out the Decepticon cargo was a prototype car wash that mind-controlled people so that humans would acquire gasoline for them, with BlackRock funding the distribution of it all. Honestly, the most ridiculous part of the whole thing is the ending, where after BlackRock swears to refund the costs of building all those gas stations to the franchisees, he'll use the profits from the stolen gasoline to help the poor of the Pacific Northwest. Look, I firmly believe that the rich should be doing that kind of thing, but there's something so utterly disingenuous and ridiculous about a guy who was spying on his own employees saying, "I'll help the poor of this specific region of the United States using this stolen gas." Issue 32 sees Blaster, Goldbug, and the Throttlebots still trying to recover from 2 issues ago. Rat has become aware of the deal with BlackRock for refueling, so any BlackRock gas station is now a trap for them. Eventually, Rat gets away with everyone but Blaster, who is captured by the Protectobots to be brought back to Grimlock for trial and execution. But enough of that. Remember the whole UK Transformers thing? Well, issues 33 and 34, they decided to reprint one of the UK-only stories, Man of Iron. It's really not at all consequential to the ongoing storyline at the time, and really kind of weird when put up against the rest of the stories. For one thing, the book was recolored to match the aesthetic of American comics, but the artwork feels very different than what they'd been doing. Another, the dialogue from the Transformers is just kind of creepy, especially with Jazz trying to talk to a little kid.
There's nothing to be afraid of. Get in. We'll go for a drive.
I can't.
Why not? It's a nice day, and you're on holiday.
Well, my mom told me not to take lifts from strangers.
But I'm not a stranger, Sammy. Deep down, you know, don't you? You've been wanting an adventure all your life. Besides, I have something to tell you. Something really important. I apologize to everyone who now has to pause and take a shower. Yeesh. Oh, and enjoy this shot of Sammy's face melting from issue 34. God, he looks like one of those malformed character ice cream bars. Issue 35 continues the story properly, with the Protectobots taking Blaster back to the Ark, but on the way, they get into a fight with the Combaticons. They also befriend a bunch of kids, and when the Protectobots get defeated, Blaster, with the help of said kids, manages to defeat them. Then, just to be weird, they take control of a Combaticon whose alt mode is a spaceship to give the kids a chance to fly through space. A lot of child kidnapping in these issues. The Protectobots decide to let Blaster go because of what he did to help, but it doesn't really matter. In the intermediate time, the Autobots have completed repairs on the Ark, and Grimlock decides that if he can't bring Blaster to him, he'll go right to Blaster, flying off and capturing them. Issue 36 introduces us to Skylinks, summoned by Wheeljack to somehow help them in dealing with Grimlock's tyranny. I'd just like to remind you guys that this is kinda your own fault for making him leader, and I don't see why it'd be so hard for you all to go, you know what, we've changed our minds, you're not our leader anymore, and we outnumber you. Skylinks is kind of interesting design-wise. Instead of having a traditional humanoid robot mode, he assumes a kind of weird dinosaur-esque thing when he's not a space shuttle with a lot of undercarriage. After the Dinobots are tricked out of the ship to go chase after Skylinks, Blaster is told by the rest of the Autobots that they want him in charge again after all the crap that's happened, though he's reluctant because of the risk to the kids, and he prepares to surrender to Grimlock. Issue 37 brings us back down to Earth to catch up with Goldbug and the Throttlebots. 3i has been interrogating them and studying them, still convinced that all the Transformers are on the same side, and they keep saying that the idea of there being 2 factions is unacceptable for some bizarre reason. Barnett, the 3i guy who we've seen several times throughout this whole thing, has slowly become convinced of their authenticity. However, 3i is finally tired of their lack of answers and decides to execute the 6, crushing them in a massive trash compactor. Fortunately, Barnett is able to rescue all their brain units and hide them in toy cars, hoping to get them back to the Autobots. The Predacons also attack 3i to claim their corpses, confirming for Barnett's superiors as they talk that there are indeed 2 warring factions at play. However, they also detect the missing brain modules and go in pursuit. Barnett takes the cars to Sparkplug and Buster, since they know how to reach the cave with the Ark. They arrive, but of course the Ark is gone, and Ratbat has followed them, ready to kill. And now we have to detour for a second. Those of you familiar with the original cartoon know that it ended with a 3-parter introducing the Headmasters.
as well as a terrible Headmaster series and its hilariously awful Omni Productions dub.
This is Unicorn. The Earth will soon be a part of me.
And has reconstructed another Soundwave and renamed him New Soundwave.
Fortress Maximus has come himself.
I'm the ninja consultant for the Decepticons.
Darn that Soundwave.
Optimus Prime, you're gonna die here.
It's been a while.
In the comics, Headmasters was its own 4-issue miniseries focusing around a group of new characters, as well as a bunch of the Season 3 cast like Hot Rod and Cup, led by Fortress Maximus. Sick of the constant, never-ending war, Fort Max leads a group of Autobots off of Cybertron and to the nearby planet Nebulos in the hopes of living out the rest of their lives in peace. Unfortunately, the natives, the Nebulans, are mostly distrustful of them, and one, Zarek, deliberately wants to wage war with them, and so he helps manipulate events to make the Autobots look like bad guys. However, Fort Max makes a sign of peace to their commander, Galen, by, having some of them rip off their own heads in front of them. Okay, self-decapitation is not a normal negotiating tactic, but I can't argue with the results. Also, one of the Nebulans is named Krunk.
That was Krunk.
After some time has passed, and despite Zarek's attempts to turn people against the Autobots, the peace endures. Unfortunately, Zarek is something of a moron, so he decides he wants to get rid of the Autobots by calling up the Decepticons and asking them to take them away. He hates the giant robots so much that he summons more giant robots to the planet.
Is this the human condition of madness, leader? It is.
The Decepticons, led by a powerful one named Scorponok, arrive and demand the Autobots be released to their custody. Galen refuses since he wants to honor the deal, and Fort Max confirms that if they try to surrender them, the Decepticons will attack anyway because they'll see it as a sign of weakness. They need the firepower of the Autobots, both from their own camp and the headless ones, but they also can't restore the heads to their bodies because Galen promised the people he wouldn't do so and thinks that that would ruin his credibility with them. You're a politician. They probably expect you to break your campaign promises at some point. They have a primitive remote control system for the Autobot bodies, but they can only barely control them. As such, they instead come up with a better solution? Fusing the Nebulans with the Autobots as kind of cybernetic hybrids. Galen in particular merging with Fortress Maximus. And thus they become Headmasters, combining with the Autobot bodies in the form of new heads while maintaining contact with the originals. After several successful missions against the Decepticons, Scorponok finally acknowledges that they need the help of Zarek and his forces, who become Headmasters themselves. Eventually, Zarek realizes that Scorponok is taking over more and more of his mind, and he encourages Galen and the other Autobots to leave, since the Decepticons will follow them wherever they go. They earlier received a distress call from the Autobots on Earth, so they decide to head there, leading us into issue 38 of the main series. The Headmasters miniseries is pretty good. While, like so many new characters in this thing, it exists to promote new toys, it does a pretty good job of giving them personalities, conflicts, and emotional depth, even though it's done in that kind of exaggerated, melodramatic way that 80s comics tended to be written like. While upgrades are made to Fortress Maximus on the way to Earth, Spike Witwicky enters the picture, returning from college to find his home wrecked from the events of the previous issue. Fortunately, Sparkplug is okay and catches his elder son up to speed on what's been happening. Spike heads to the cave of the Ark, but is only able to find the electric cars that house the Throttlebots. The Headmasters arrive there as well, discovering that the distress call came from Goldbug, discovering their brain modules in the toy cars. They check Goldbug's last memories, which include Ratbat taking Buster away. Spike reveals himself to them to try to get them to help, but Galen has taken a real shine to being a dickwad and says that he came to help Autobots, not humans. Scorponok's forces soon arrive as well, and it's only thanks to Spike sending another distress call that gets Fort Max to come back and realize, yeah, I should probably help Earth people too. My bad. Galen sacrifices himself to save Spike, handing over the control helmet of Fort Max to him. And I guess that helmet's all you need to really be a headmaster, since the others say that he's going to be their new leader. I see that Nebulan government is decided by who has the fanciest hat. I would be Emperor. Meanwhile, in issue 39, 3i has tracked the Decepticons back to their artificial island in the Caribbean, serving as their base. They now are on board with the some robots good, some robots bad theory, and call in Barnett. Turns out Buster only had Goldbug with him. The other Throttlebots are safe with Barnett, and they want to figure out a way to rescue Buster from the Decepticons before they blow the island to hell. Barnett calls Sparkplug to let him know his son is alive, and it turns out Spike is visiting him, while wearing a massive trench coat to try to hide that he's a headmaster now. And Sparkplug honestly didn't notice. Yeah, maybe Sparkplug should have listened to his son about that reading and education thing. I think he might need it. The helmet, of course, is not just what was necessary. Spike has been completely augmented, hence the suit. They launch their rescue attempt for Buster, but it turns out to be a trap, knocking away most of the Autobots going after him until it's revealed that the artificial island is actually a spaceship that takes off. They manage to get away, but in the ensuing struggles, Shockwave falls into the atmosphere and is seemingly burnt up. Our final issue today, number 40, introduces the Pretenders, a kind of weird and pointless, in my opinion, line for the Transformers. The idea behind them was that the robots wore shells that either made them look human or like weird monsters. The toys themselves have no articulation for the outer shells, with a tiny robot inside that, hey, does transform. But of course, they're still bigger than humans, so it's not even a very convincing disguise in-universe. But hey, they're the focus of the issue because they're the toys we're promoting. Oh, and we finally follow up on Optimus Prime's brain, but really, who cares about that, am I right? Ethan Zachary has moved on from the whole alternative energy thing and now owns a game development company. At least until he got acquired by EA and the company dismantled so the executives could report an increase in revenue for this quarter. Optimus's brain is basically now a video game character for one of Ethan's games, and Optimus is none the wiser about his true nature, apparently not realizing how weird it is that, as a video game character, he can just interact with Ethan like he does. Ethan does try to explain who he really is, but in this form, Optimus can't see beyond the parameters of being a video game character. He also finally tries to get in touch with the Autobots to get Prime to them, but with the art gone and Sparkplug being pissed at all the Transformers stuff, he has no luck. Fortunately, Spike tapped his dad's phone as a safety precaution. A lot of the good guys are really into invasions of privacy, I've noticed, and overhears. They've rebuilt Goldbug's body for him, and he figures he should investigate what Ethan is talking about. Ethan fills him in on everything that's happened, and they just need to reawaken Prime's memory of who he really is. They decide to investigate the Decepticons, who are breaking into a genetics laboratory to create the Pretenders. Scorponok's reasoning is that the Autobots won't suspect that they're Decepticons until it's too late. Except for the fact that you made them all giant monster people who are still aggressive and want to kill humans. Otherwise, great plan, dude. Detecting the infiltration, the Pretenders are sent to attack the game studio, but Fortress Maximus decides to make Autobot Pretenders of their own to defend it. They fight, Optimus coordinating them as if it was a game, and in the process seems to regain a lot of his old characteristics, but in the end still thinks it all wasn't real. And that's where we're gonna leave off for now. Next week, will Optimus be restored? Who will win leadership between Blaster and Grimlock? How many more new characters will we have to try to remember and figure out if we should care about them, or they'll just be forgotten by the next issue? Find out next time on the Transformers, number 41 to 80. Hello and welcome to Atop the Fourth Wall, where bad comics burn. Marvel That Meets the Eye continues with the latter half of this 4-issue miniseries. We left off on issue 40. So let's get you all caught up on what happened last week.
Take control of the noble office bots as they wage slave their secret war against the evil Execucons.
Office bots, transform and clock in.
Actually, let's take a moment to talk about a few things from last time that I didn't really dive into. With the continual shifting focus of new characters, you might be inclined to kind of think of it like, say, Rob Liefeld's Youngblood output or the like. The thing is, though, that Buddy Ansky, despite being weighed down by Hasbro continually telling him, promote this new toy every month, knew how to craft stories with them. Because of the nature of this retrospective, I can't fully deep dive into each issue without the retrospective ballooning beyond its already lengthy time, but we've still got individual issues telling stories. The return of Cybertron two-parter last time, where we met Blaster, It's excellent, in particular the smelting pool and its tragedy of an Autobot who wanted to be respected by his peers but kept screwing up. Blaster still believed in him, but he tragically died while giving him the info they needed. I felt more emotion and sympathy for this one-off character in the book than I've ever felt for anything Rob Liefeld did with Youngblood. Hell, the dude didn't even get a toy until 2016. Which admittedly was just a redeco of the UFO Transformer I've brought up a few times. Poor guy still doesn't get respect. My point is, the comics kept doing that. Those 5 Autobots Optimus based on copies of memories of ones he knew back on Cybertron? That was the Rock concert issue, which was just really more of a fun comedy, even though the individual Transformers didn't stand out. But they didn't have to still get the ideas across. Omega Supreme gets introduced, and while the focus of the issue is on the Autobot attack to get info on the Combiner Tech, we get to see how cool and badass he is by taking down 6 Decepticons on his own.
I am the guardian of the gates, the junction of your destruction, the laser lighting the way to your doom, the planner of your obsolescence, the furnace that fires your demise. I am the number you cannot compute, Decepticon. I am the square root of -1.
But that number cannot exist!
You lack imagination, Decepticon.
Skids' desire to break away from the war, run about and run amok, painting lame graffiti while advancing Circuit Breaker story arc, the Predacons being summoned to covertly assassinate Megatron. The book may not follow a central cast for its long run in each issue, but you feel satisfied reading these stories because they're told so competently and advance the ideas of the franchise. That's the thing about toyetic shows and franchises. The problem is never that they're trying to sell toys, it's that often they're not being clever enough in how they sell the toys. Soundwave might be my favorite, but damn if I don't want a Skids or a Fortress Maximus toy now, because I liked how things have been presented in the comic. So yeah, despite the ever-changing character focus, despite the coloring and model errors, high purple Soundwave and toy versions of Ratchet and others because the artists didn't have the final versions to base you on, despite the lack of some of the familiar staples, this comic has been a fun space opera in the same vein as ROM, just not focused on a single character. Oh yeah, those lack of familiar staples. For instance, Optimus has been presumed dead and absent for 16 issues. Megatron's been gone for 15, and I didn't mention it because the battle was so quick, but Starscream has been gone since the attack that Omega Supreme foiled. Kind of presumed dead, but we'll later learn that their bodies are deactivated and held in the Ark. Sure, it sucks that so many of them have been sidelined, but at the same time, it's allowing more focus on characters like Soundwave, Ratbat, Blaster, Grimlock, and others to get more time and seeing how they operate without the mainstays around. But a lot of these characters are indeed returning, and we've still got plenty of new faces to say hello to as well. Let's dig into the Transformers number 41 to 80 and see what sort of twists are coming our way in the latter half of the Marvel series. We begin issue 41 with Optimus Prime exploding. Again. I mean, this was at one point connected to the larger Marvel universe. You've just got to expect some characters to die and then come back to life and then die again multiple times. What's actually happening here is that they're trying to restore Prime's body now that they've got the floppy disk that contains his brain. Unfortunately, the Headmasters have used up all their resources in rebuilding Goldbug and the Pretenders, so unfortunately they're incapable of constructing a new body for him that'll remain stable. They detect the Ark nearby and figure they'll have resources to help in the process. Grimlock, however, is being his tyrannical self, refusing to care about the Decepticons they left on Earth. But hey, at least this answered what happens to his crown when it transforms. It stays on his dinosaur head. Neat. They meet up, but Grimlock is none too happy with the news they bring. Autobots bonded with humans, Goldbug being with them, plus Optimus Prime's brain. Goldbug surrenders himself for the sake of unity, but Grimlock wants to wage battle with Fortress Maximus using an old archaic single combat tradition for leadership of the Autobots. Now Grimlock, you can't challenge him like this. You've got to send 2 annoying minions out to write graffiti everywhere and then forget you wanted to make the challenge. Goldbug convinces Blaster to fight in place of Fortress Maximus, since Fort Max is still recovering from battle 2 issues ago. Unfortunately, the Decepticons, still in the rocket island they blasted into space, track Fort Max's ship to the Ark, and thus plan on making an attack. Blaster and Grimlock's battle takes place on the moon, and it's a damn good fight, most of the Autobots standing around and watching. But then the Decepticons launch their sneak attack. Most of it is actually a distraction. The Constructicons focus on damaging the Ark, since Grimlock didn't leave anyone to guard it, as well as recover all the captured Decepticons from the battle I mentioned they had last time with Omega Supreme. All helpfully labeled in boxes. This is the worst toy packaging I've ever seen. Grimlock and Blaster, upon spotting the battle from afar, realize that their struggle with one another helped the Decepticons launch this attack. Even Grimlock is forced to admit that for someone who's supposed to be the leader of all the Autobots, he's done a piss-poor job leading. As such, they agree that the battle ends in a draw and go to fight the Decepticons. In the meantime, Goldbug heads to Fort Max's ship, the Steelhaven, and instructs the team left on guard duty that they have to take off per Fort Max's orders. Their ship is no match for the Decepticons, and safeguarding Optimus Prime's brain takes priority. They force the Decepticons into retreat, but the Ark is severely damaged. Unless they can repair it, they'll all run out of power on the moon. Fort Max explains that he sent his ship to the one place where they might all gain back the leader they need with the resources necessary to rebuild Prime. Nebulos, where the Headmaster's stuff all started. It's the only place left in the universe where Optimus Prime can be upgraded from 5 1/4 inch to 3 1/2 inch. Goldbug and his team arrive on Nebulos in issue 42, and unfortunately, things are not great. They're directed to High Q, a scientist who has the capabilities to build Optimus a new body, and gives them the rundown of what happened. After the Autobots and Decepticons left, he and his partner, High Test, were given the task of devising a way to prevent Transformers from ever returning to Nebulos. They saturated the atmosphere with a unique radiation that tainted any fuel sources that could be used by Cybertronians. The radiation posed no threat to humans. 2 Decepticons arrived on Nebulos looking for Scorponok and his forces, and when the Nebulans refused to explain where they had gone, they stuck around and ingested some of the fuel sources. However, High Test, jealous of High Q for coming up with the solution, stole some of High Q's research on the Power Master process, wherein, like the Headmaster's idea, humans are converted into cybernetic enhancements to bond to Transformers. However, instead of becoming their heads, well...
In order to change a human being into this.
Okay, High Q, if you were the good guy, why were you doing research on how to turn human beings into batteries? The downside of the Power Master process is that the humans now need to eat at least 10 times as much food as they had done before for fuel, and yet weirdly they have to poop 30 times more than a normal human. After the Autobots risk themselves to try to stop the 2 Power Masters, High Q and his science team agree to rebuild Optimus's body. Mind you, he still thinks this is all a game, but only briefly. He's been upgraded to combine with his trailer unit to be more powerful, and when he starts to die from lack of energy, his memories and realization of his existence return. High Q, impressed that the Autobots are as alive as any person, agree to become Optimus's Power Master unit to save him. The other scientists, save for one, also decide to become Power Masters to save the others, except for Goldbug, who's more fuel efficient than the others and thus doesn't need it. They force the 2 to leave, but High Q and his team have to leave as well. The Power Master process created fundamental changes to them that they can't survive without the human component, and the Autobots can't stay because the entire point of this whole thing was to keep Transformers off of Nebulos. It's really kind of interesting just how much we've deviated from the animated series at this point. We're about 6 months past the end of the cartoon with our next issue, and we are nowhere near anything like it. So in issue 43, the Quintessons use subliminal messages and TV transmissions to convince the Junkions to hate other lifeforms, leading to an eventual confrontation between Rodimus Prime and Galvatron on their homeworld. Yeah, issue 43 was a fill-in issue, where the regular creative team is running behind schedule for whatever reason, and they need to release something for the month. Often, DC and Marvel used to have what were called inventory stories. Basically, commission a comic issue that you don't actually intend to release unless you need it as a backup. They're done-in-ones, usually made by a different creative team, as shown here, as Buddy Ansky did not write this one, and sometimes will interrupt a major storyline. Whether this was an inventory story or not, I couldn't say, but I suspect it was. This issue is an adaptation of The Big Broadcast of 2006, a Season 3 episode of the show. I have no idea why this episode episode in particular was chosen, but it's likely just for convenience sake. That maybe this was made in 1986 when the episode aired, and maybe they thought the comic would eventually be heading in the direction of the movie and TV series. Instead, this is just a saga from the future. If you can call a story where most of it is the Junkions making random pop culture references while every other faction out there is just confused about what's going on, a saga. But yeah, let's just move on to issue 44. On their way back to the moon, our heroes receive an intergalactic advertisement for a cosmic carnival. The greatest show in the galaxy! Oh, criminy, the gods of Ragnarok are at it again! Yes, Transformers is canon to Doctor Who as well, thanks to Death's Head over in the UK issues. Screw the Tommy Westphall universe, Marvel holds connections to like 99% of pop culture in one way or another. Naturally, they want to ignore this whole thing and get back to the moon, but then in the promotional images, they see Skylynx, whom they had last seen protecting those kids from the Dinobots. Earlier dialogue had said they had flown off after Blaster surrendered. Admittedly, I would have gone off to go help the Autobots first, time crunch and all, plus you could get backup, but whatever. Long story short, before the kids were flown back to Earth, they saw the ad for the circus and wanted to check it out, but they entered without paying. Skylynx was forced to sign a contract to perform, the kids too, until they'd paid off their debt. Our heroes rescue them, with Optimus even joining in on the act with Skylynx. People waited almost 2 years for Optimus Prime to come back, and what is the first thing he does? Join the circus. I kid, of course. In the process of escaping, they basically destroy the other acts under the big top. Wonder how the crowd's reacting to all this when this wasn't what they paid to see.
You know, I could get quite cross about this.
Issue 45's mostly a done-in-one, with the only major ongoing story developments show Skylynx finally returning to Earth with the kids so they can be reunited with their parents. Interestingly, he actually contacted Earth ahead of time, and they even have a brief interview before a crowd of people protesting the Transformers forces him to leave. The issue instead focuses on one of the Decepticon pretenders, Skullgrin, who was sent by Scorponok to set up a secret fuel depot. As a Decepticon pretender, your outer shell hides your robotic form. Perhaps you'll arouse less suspicion that way. Yep, nothing suspicious about a 20-foot-tall monster whose head looks like a cow skull. I'm starting to think Zarek's presence as Scorponok's head slowly drained his intelligence. He ends up being found by a sci-fi movie producer who recruits him as the monster for his next film, but the whole thing ends up in flames when Circuit Breaker, suspecting he's actually a Transformer, attacks. I'd say this is further evidence of why the Pretenders concept just doesn't work, but honestly, with Circuit Breaker, she probably suspects that trees are secretly in league with robots whenever they don't provide enough shade. To continue our trend of focusing on the bad guys, probably due to Hasbro wanting to showcase more toys, issue 46 is another done-in-one, this time featuring something of a scheme of the week by Scorponok. He sets up a fake anti-Transformers foundation and enlists human bounty hunters to track down Autobots using a jammer technology that will inhibit a Transformer's ability to, well, transform. With the aid of some Autobots, the bounty hunters defeat Scorponok and plan to sell the jammer technology to humans, but this is never followed up on. Issue 47 instead begins another plot of the week, but it's more than that. It's the first part of the 4-issue Underbase saga. The Decepticons advertise Club Con, a tropical vacation resort that features the Decepticons acting as servants for humans. Your journey to paradise begins the moment one of our expert travel agents arrives at your doorstep.
Hi, I'm Starscream! Fly me! These vacationers have spent all their money! I, Starscream, am now on vacation!
The Autobots have reunited and the Ark repaired, now orbiting Earth. What gets them to finally become involved is that Buster is also part of the commercial, shown as the king of the island. It's gonna turn out this has been Buster's long con the whole time, convincing Ratbat it's more fuel efficient and profitable to just run a vacation resort instead of trying to get energy for Cybertron. Blaster is intended to be sent in with Sparkplug to infiltrate the island. While Sparkplug still wants nothing to do with the Transformers after everything that's happened, he saw Buster in the ad and will do anything to get him back. However, Buster's girlfriend Jessie decided to go instead, saying that she should be the one to do it since the resort is advertised to young people and Sparkplug would be suspicious. Old people don't take vacations? What the hell are you talking about? Look, the reality is that the teenage boys who read this comic are desperate for some fan service and I'm gonna give it to them. The hell you are! I didn't buy a new bikini just so I'd be upstaged by you and yours. The two eventually discover an underwater base, as well as Buster held as a prisoner. He explains that hundreds of years ago, some Autobots on Cybertron detected something approaching Earth. They knew about Optimus and company crashing on the planet 4 million years ago and sent 2 microcassettes, Rain Dance and Grand Slam, to warn Optimus about whatever it was that was approaching. Okay, I should be questioning why, if they knew Optimus was here this whole time, they didn't just dispatch people to come get him and the others, but I just love the acknowledgement of Rain Dance and Grand Slam. They're microcassettes that turn into a jet and a tank, and as you may have noticed, I'm all about the microcassettes. The ship malfunctioned as it entered Earth's atmosphere and it crash-landed, the 2 cassettes wounded and disabled, sinking into the bottom of the ocean. The Decepticons have finally tracked them down and are searching for them. Ratbat set up the island as a sovereign nation, then started the vacation resort thing as a cover for their search for the shipwreck. The Decepts keep me around as the figurehead king. They figured correctly that with a human ruler, no other country could legally interfere with their search. I was also going to point out that this whole thing is patently ridiculous on so many levels, but apparently the forming their own island nation thing does kind of have precedence with the Principality of Sealand. Look it up. It still shouldn't stop the humans from wondering what the hell they're up to and investigate regardless of the claim of their independence, but still, A for effort on this plan and the logistics of it. Jesse and Blaster can't free Buster just yet, but they do escape to inform the Autobots of what's up. Issue 48 continues the Underbase saga, and is one of a few issues featuring Soundwave without his mouthplate.
Soundwave making new changes in his life. You could even call me New Soundwave.
Examining the tapes, the Decepticons discover what the deal is. Within each Transformer is a database, the sum total of all their knowledge and wisdom. Millions of years ago, there was a database of databases, the combined knowledge of all Transformers. This is the Underbase, and the sum totality of that information and knowledge contained in any one Transformer would be devastating. All that knowledge could make a Transformer more than what they are. Expansion of consciousness, limitless energy, etc. Who knew that Wikipedia would be the deadliest weapon of all? As per my joke, information is not capable of doing anything like that, but I would imagine it's more akin to how in the Stargate franchise, some races have been able to ascend to a higher plane of existence or change into pure energy by accumulating enough knowledge. It's less to do with the information itself, but rather the kind of things it can convey are concepts so advanced that it can physically alter you, probably on an instinctual and subconscious level. Your body chemistry, or in this case mechanics, alters to contain all that information, and the only way to do so is to become, well, you get the idea. It's worse than that, though, since even the storage medium of the Underbase is transformed by its existence, giving off enough energy that could destroy stars and planets. And the 2 microcassettes wanted to inform Optimus Prime that the Underbase would be approaching Earth's solar system. Well, that it would be approaching Earth in, like, 200 years, but still, it's good to start planning early. The Decepticons have charted the course and determined that it'll be in the solar system in less than a week. Issue 49 brings Scorponok's forces to meet with Ratbats. Starscream invited them since they saw the commercials advertising their beach resort. And let's face it, the Decepticon headmasters have had a bit of a rough time too. They could use a vacation. After Blaster discovered their operations, they ended the resort and moved to the Arctic. Starscream also didn't tell Ratbat about Scorponok's communiques until they arrived. Soon, after giving a tour to Scorponok's forces of their base, they see Buster, who lets slip about the Underbase. Aggravated that he wasn't informed about this, Scorponok decides they'll find no help or camaraderie from Ratbat's forces and decides to leave. Unfortunately, this was Starscream's plan all along, as Ratbat refuses to let them leave now that they know about the Underbase, and the 2 sides begin to fight. Starscream then takes Buster and leaves him on an iceberg 2 miles away with a signal device for the Autobots to come rescue him. With him that close, the Decepticons will unite and fight the Autobots, and then both factions will be distracted fighting each other while he goes and takes the power of the Underbase. And indeed, he steals Scorponok's ship, the 2 Decepticon leaders realizing his treachery, bringing us into issue 50 and the conclusion of the Underbase saga. And you gotta give the dude credit, he's been back online for only a short time, and already his treachery has nabbed him access to that kind of power. With skills like that, maybe Starscream should have been leader of the Decepticons, and Megatron was holding him back. Issue 50's cover is another one of those classics I mentioned last time. This uber-powerful, over-detailed Starscream standing tall and triumphant around some Transformers under his sway. I'm especially fond of all the detailing on him. Back in the days when I did some 3D modeling, this was called greeble. It's actually something that lines up with comic art. As a general rule, the more lines on someone's face give the impression of more age, and just like that, greeble gives the impression of something much more complex and not just random lines and circles all over him. I mean, after all, do you think Jose Delbo, the artist, actually figured out what those 3 circles on Starscream's right leg do? Anyway, issue 50 is an oversized comic, 38 pages instead of the regular 22. The Autobots rescue Buster while the Decepticons prepare to leave, ready to put aside their differences to focus on the real threat from Starscream. However, the presence of so many Autobots distracts them and, like morons, they attack. Even Skullgrin is with them for this. Yeah, his movie career stalled after he said some racist things about the Combaticons. Don't worry, dude. Knowing how Hollywood works, you'll somehow be forgiven for all that in a few years, despite no attempts to make amends. Meanwhile, Starscream approaches the underbase.
Yes, I can imagine how that fleshling, Buster Witwicky, used the device I gave him to save his puny life, calling his deluded, do-gooder Autobot friends to their doom, unaware as they must have been that the Decepticons' main base was only a short distance away. And now, happily, the two sides no doubt slaughter each other, because no one had the will, the guile, the vision to do what I am about to do! And man, I really need some troops to command. Monologuing to yourself isn't really quite as satisfying.
Buster, recovered enough from the cold, informs Fort Max and Ratbat about Starscream's plan to deceive them all. And so the two sides finally declare a ceasefire and join forces. Optimus points out the folly of anyone going after it. I learned then that its power is too great for anyone being to, typo, possess. Mere possession brings madness. Or death. Or death, then madness. The Transformers all ready the Decepticon base and launch it, but they're too late. Starscream has already reached the underbase.
Blind me with your awful light! Thrill me with your darkest secret!
Starscream immediately regrets his decision when the underbase begins listing off increasingly bizarre fetishes, which starts off with window curtains and keeps getting weirder from there.
Fill me with your unholy power! Give yourself to me!
Oops, sorry Starscream, but you've reached your limit of unholy power for today. But if you pay this microtransaction, you'll get an additional 50 unholy power. Fortunately, the Transformers soon arrive and shoot Starscream, blasting him away from the underbase. However, even that brief exposure was enough to empower him, and he blows the flying island apart and sends everyone hurtling through space. Starscream says he'll let them drift throughout eternity as punishment for attacking him. Ironic punishment given what happened to Starscream in Season 3. He leaves to go conquer the Earth, specifically stating that he'll make the humans obey him by destroying New York, Tokyo, and Buenos Aires. Not sure why he specifically felt the need to point out which cities he'd destroy, as if that mattered to either side, but hey, again, Starscream just needs an audience. Optimus fortunately anticipated this possibility and made sure the Ark would be nearby to come save them. Although this does raise the question of why they wasted time prepping the Decepticon Island rocket if they could have just taken the Ark. They elect to split into teams, each one led by an Autobot and Decepticon, to intercept Starscream at the 3 cities. Optimus remaining behind on the Ark to safeguard Buster and enact another plan, though the Decepticons think he's just being cowardly. And this leads to, well, a slaughter. Buddy Ansky's time in the book was coming to a close, and he realized that the Underbase saga needed a big finale to justify the hype. In addition, with Hasbro continually requesting new characters be added to push the toys, he then realized in turn that Hasbro wouldn't give a crap if he killed off the characters who didn't have any new toys. As such, a lot of Transformers get killed here. Ones that had focus on them, like Blaster, others who were introduced and then barely did anything, like Jetfire or the Triple Changers. Just a lot of clearing the deck. The good news is that, in Buddy Ansky's view, killing off robots isn't really the same thing as killing off a human, since robots can be rebuilt and restored, and it does happen to some, like the Dinobots, all killed in this issue, but all restored later. It's just in some cases, like the Technobots or the Predacons or Thundercracker, we don't see them come back. We do, however, see Soundwave return after his death because, well,
Soundwave superior.
The ones who directly survive are the ones who have an organic component, the headmasters, the pretenders, etc. The underbase's power seems to have trouble with more organic life. Even Omega Supreme, who was the one who took down Starscream 31 issues ago, gets blasted and taken out. Buster makes a transmission to Fortress Maximus and informs him that Optimus is working on something. Starscream, overhearing, decides to go and deal with Optimus before he can launch his plan. Ratbat and Scorponok try to stop Optimus as well, thinking he's trying to steal the underbase for himself, but in reality, he's redirecting it right at Earth. Scorponok kills Ratbat and tries to take the underbase's power, but Optimus stops him. Instead, Starscream arrives and absorbs the rest of the underbase. However, as Optimus said, even mere possession of it brought madness or death, so in this case, Starscream's absorption of the remaining power overloads him, and he blows up. The call from Buster was a deliberate ploy to bring him up. Prime and Scorponok depart to tend to their wounded and dead, ending the Underbase saga. And it's a great one. It builds up the size and intensity as it goes on, starting as just a weird Decepticon scheme of the week, and ending on a threat that required both sides, around 80 or so Transformers, to unite to try to take it out. The body count is unfortunate, but understandable, especially when it comes to clearing the deck and letting the focus shift back to a few primary characters, and it truly established the threat that Starscream posed. Admittedly, there's kind of a plot hole here with why they didn't just let Starscream absorb the full power of the underbase at the start if this was inevitable, but I suppose Optimus couldn't risk him realizing the danger of that and just getting a little bit of it, since even that small portion he got was decimating. Issue 51 brings us back down to Earth along with the Witwickies. Spike wants to get rid of the Fortress Maximus helmet since he only joined up to find Buster, and now he's free and all. The Autobots, even Fort Max himself, are all okay with him not being the headmaster anymore, but wanted him to keep the helmet in case it should be needed. However, instead of just putting it in a box for safekeeping, he keeps having nightmares and instead decides to toss it into a junkyard like an idiot. After some new Decepticon pretenders hunt after him, he realizes that becoming Fortress Maximus has made him a new person, and it's a part of who he is now. So while he still can't have a normal life, he does need to be ready to summon Fortress Maximus should the need arise. It's good character stuff, and a nice change of pace after the epic of the Underbase saga. Also, the Decepticons are still making new pretenders, despite needing a genetics lab before for that, and no real reason to do so, especially when these ones are, like, animals with guns on their backs. With issue 52, the Autobots are working to repair those damaged or destroyed in the Underbase saga. This is a case where the Pretenders concept works better. 2 Autobot Pretenders are dispatched to a black market to purchase the replacement microchips they need to make repairs. The place is unfriendly to machine life, and most of these aliens don't know that humans shouldn't be that big, so they're able to blend in. However, the issue also allows us to catch up with Skylynx, who had partnered up with a human from the Cosmic Circus, and unfortunately the Decepticon Power Masters from Nebulos, who work for robot-eating creatures called Mechanibals. They rescue Skylynx from them before he can become dinner, although they in turn are captured by the Mechanibals, and leading into issue 53, where they convince them to not eat them right away. Instead are ordered to get materials to make them a savory banquet. The Mechanibals hold Skylynx's human buddy as a hostage, and they travel to the planet Phoemax, wherein there's a warrior woman society that enslaves their genetically inferior men, but their leader is impressed with one of the Pretenders' fighting prowess and wants to perform snoo-snoo. Shenanigans ensue, Skylynx helps save the day, but they ultimately don't use the microchips they were going to acquire because they were taken from the robots the Mechanibals ate. Or rather, regurgitated. The Pretenders even make a deal to restore the robots to normal with all their component parts, since the entire layer of the Mechanibals is made of them, but like, why would they keep records of who it was they devoured and how to rebuild them? And they would need to get new parts and stuff because the Mechanibals must have ingested something, otherwise why would they be eating the robots? It just doesn't make much sense. Issue 54 brings us back to introducing new characters, but at least we have a decent story reason for introducing these toys, plus an in-universe explanation for them. These Autobots, the Micromasters, are brought in by Optimus to help replenish their numbers after the fight with Starscream. They're much smaller Transformers, the toys being Hasbro's answer to Galoob's Micro Machines. Although, in the mid-90s, Micro Machines fought back with the awesomeness that is Z-Bots. Yeah, I don't know if they actually were trying to compete. Probably not. I just take any excuse to show off Z-Bots. And in turn, the Micromasters in the comic assume robot mode's only a little bigger than a normal human. Still big, but tiny compared to someone like Optimus. The idea in-universe is that with energy resources so limited, they're built to be smaller to conserve energy. Given a comment by Beast Wars Megatron about the Autobots and their larger size, it's likely a similar thing happened in the great upgrade from Autobot to Maximal in that universe. Anyway, they foil a Decepticon scheme to harness an electrical storm that would have annihilated most of Manhattan in the process, and elect to stay in the city to help fight crime, leading us to issue 55, where one of the Micromasters, Road Handler, gets roped into a wrestling match. It's actually pretty entertaining once they explain how professional wrestling works and plan a whole routine with it. Road Handler winning the Interplanetary Wrestling Championship. Ooh, probably shouldn't have gone for the title match. She might attract some new competition.
Road Handler! You might be the hot new thing on Cybertron, but Moon Button is here from parts unknown to put you back in the scrap heap. Normally, I'd use the button press on you, but I think today it's more appropriate to use the trash compactor. Ooh! Ah!
The Micromasters are presented as young, arrogant, and kinda hot-headed, but honestly, Road Handler has one point that kinda sticks well. He's doing more to improve human-Autobot relations than Optimus and the others have done in 50 issues, informing people about the Decepticon threat, making people trust the Autobots, and just doing good PR while also fighting crime. It's honestly really entertaining, well thought out and cute, especially Road Handler's pep talk to the kids. And remember, if I can do it in the ring, you can do it on the streets. You've got the power to beat the bad guys out there and make this planet a better place for you and me. Yes, even you can transform into a car and deadlift humans with one hand. Scorponok summons Decepticon Micromasters to try to defeat him in the ring so people would lose faith in the Autobots. The only downside of this whole thing is that while he wins, Road Handler turns heel and gives up wrestling, insulting the audience in that "I must make you hate me so you distance yourself from me and are kept safe" kinda crappy trope. This was Buddy Ansky's last issue on the book, apparently inspired from when other Marvel staffers went to wrestling matches and would talk about them at work. Honestly, it's just a really fun issue. I should probably review it on its own in the future, just because of how entertaining it is. From here on out, Simon Furman is the writer of the book up until its ending. Furman was a prolific author for the UK Transformers issues, so it made sense to bring him over for it. Apparently it was also Buddy Ansky's suggestion. Furman has both positive and negative aspects to him when it comes to Transformer stuff. Infamously, he stated before that there shouldn't be female Transformers, believing that they should be genderless, except in practice, they're presented as male and use male pronouns, so genderless in this case just means He-Man Woman Haters Club. He apparently didn't get why robots would have women. Why would robots have beards? Why would robots have names instead of numerical designations? Why are robots programmed to feel pain? Why do robots become wrestling champions? I hope I'm making myself clear here. The two times he introduced Arcee into canon were, well, not great. The first is where she was built in the Marvel UK issues because a feminist mob complained about the lack of female Transformers, aka straw feminists. Although, given this franchise, maybe I should start referring to them as pretender feminists. The second time was an even worse idea. In the 2005 IDW continuity, she was originally a genderless robot who was experimented on and forced to become female, which is uncomfortable and bad for a number of reasons, to the point where future writers had to correct this in a variety of ways, but that's neither here nor there. Look, I don't point this stuff out so you can attack Furman or insult him or anything. He doesn't go out of his way to go on tirades about this stuff, or refuses to write them or anything like that. It's an issue that's followed him around, and I'd be remiss if I didn't mention it. Likewise, another lighter thing that's become associated with him: Furmanisms. Writers have things they like to do with their stories. Comfort zones, repetitive motifs, just things they'll keep calling back to, for good and for bad. For instance, Stephen Moffat, during his time on Doctor Who, A lot of his stories dealt with time shenanigans where events happen out of order for the viewer, or a repetitive trick he liked to use in several episodes was a character going from one weird sci-fi locale to another looking for someone or something. And it's usually pretty pointless and unnecessary, but he does it anyway in a few episodes. It's a bit self-indulgent. Hell, even I have some of those things that I'm aware of and I'm trying to break myself out of the habit of doing. Points to you if you can point out what they are in the comments. And in Simon Furman's case, it's phrases that he likes to repeat over and over and over, referred to as Furmanisms. It's stuff like, "You will die screaming," "It is over," "Finished," or "Power beyond measure." There isn't anything wrong with them. It's just something Transformers fans noticed over the years, and it's become a fun quirk. Anyway, issue 56 returns us back to the main Autobots, and a recurring one who of course survived the Starscream slaughter, Ratchet, who's having nightmares about his inability to repair the Autobots. Well, given what we discovered last time, we've just got to find a pizza delivery car's logo, a coffin from a hearse, and the Wienermobile, and that's all we need to fix these guys. While the rest of the Autobots are on a mission, a group of Decepticons infiltrate the Ark with their replacement for the space bridge, the Trans-Time Dimensional Portal. Somehow they're able to reanimate some of the dead Autobots to attack Ratchet, but when he refuses to fight them, the Decepticons change tactics, disabling them and offering to take him back to Cybertron to make use of their advanced repair facilities. They're disguised as Autobots, which is why he trusts them. However, when they arrive on Cybertron, Ratchet is greeted by the leader of this group, Megatron. Bear in mind that Megatron has been gone from the series for almost 3 years now. Bringing him back to face off against Ratchet again is nicely unexpected, but also a great callback to early in the book's run, maintaining a strong continuity despite the change in writer. I think it was a good move on Furman's part. Does Ratchet even know that Megatron's supposed to be dead? Like, that issue only had Decepticons in it. Yeah, Ratchet even tells Megatron that he heard he blew himself up. From where? That's not the kind of thing the Decepticons would be advertising, and frankly, even when the two sides were working together to stop Starscream, I have a hard time believing that was a topic of small talk. Oh, by the way, did you hear? Megatron accidentally blew himself up along with the space bridge because he thought Optimus Prime survived on a floppy disk. Can you believe that? Pass the laser spanner. Also, minor continuity note between issues, Ratchet realized something was wrong when they teleported him away because they didn't bring the dead Autobots with them, except in the next issue, we see their bodies there too. Anyway, he's brought Ratchet here for his skill in repairing Transformers, using a new kind of Decepticon pretender shell to recreate a damaged Transformer within. He also explains that the explosion was supposed to cover his escape, but he miscalculated how far he needed to be from the blast, and instead was sent through the portal and ended up deactivated in a bad part of Cybertron instead. That's quite an impressive spin doctoring, Megatron, especially the part where you needed to cover your escape. From who exactly? Your own troops? I mean, they were probably going to back you instead of Shockwave, considering you already showed you could take down the Predacons on your own. He was discovered later after wandering dazed and confused by some Decepticon Micromasters, who repaired him and started working for him. He forces Ratchet to cooperate by threatening other Autobots who had been left on the Ark, which is now under his control. This patient... well, maybe Megatron still has a few screws loose, because the one he wants to resurrect is Starscream.
Starscream has fallen! I, Megatron, am the new leader of the Decepticons!
How the hell there are any remains of Starscream to be resurrected is confusing, to say the least, given last time he was giant-sized and blowed up real good, but whatever. In issue 58, Ratchet agrees to do it, but only to buy time, instead taking the opportunity to put his fallen friends, Grimlock, Jazz, and Goldbug, into some prototype pretender shells that Megatron had in the laboratory. Starscream's a blank slate now for Megatron to program as he wishes, wanting the irony of using him to gain revenge over... I don't know who. Shockwave's been missing since issue 39, and Ratbat's dead, and he's never met Scorponok, so... who does he want revenge against? While Starscream is sent to Earth to fight against the Autobots and Decepticons, who have realized that somebody has been manipulating them, we enter issue 59 with the 3 dead Autobots now restored. Goldbug is also now back to being Bumblebee because... Well, he's the one they gave a Pretender toy to. Ratchet says it's because of personal preference, that he preferred his original form. Hey Optimus, I repaired your damage, and I reverted you back to your original body. I thought your Power Master form was too chunky. Meanwhile, Starscream battles Scorponok and Prime's forces. Starscream's dead! I saw him destroyed, blown apart by the vast energies of the underbase!
Ha! Perhaps then, Lord Zarek, I am his ghost, come to wreak dread revenge on those who let me perish! And if I am a ghost, I'd better go steal some eyes for Unicron so he'll give me a new body.
Also, let you perish? Dude, you murdered like 50 Transformers! Fortunately, Ratchet left a surprise with Starscream to make him less dangerous. His original programming. A powerful enough hit reverts him to normal, who realizes he's outgunned and surrenders to Scorponok. Megatron had ordered his troops to plant bombs on the Ark, but with Ratchet's help, the Autobots aboard it used the trans-time dimensional portal to teleport them back to Megatron's base. Ratchet tackles Megatron into the portal. The base explodes, thankfully without Jazz, Bumblebee, or Grimlock inside, leading us to issue 60. Ratchet is presumed dead, which weighs heavily on Optimus's mind, especially with how many others have died in this war finally coming down on him hard. On Cybertron, our resurrected heroes join up with the Autobot resistance to stage some successful raids, though plan to return to Earth. Of more import, though, are two characters introduced here. The first being Lord Thunderwing, who's the leader of the Decepticon forces on Cybertron. The other is Bludgeon, this pretender who's a samurai with a skull for a face. Okay, admittedly, he may not fool people into thinking he's a real human, but the psychological warfare angle of a giant samurai with a skull face cannot be understated. Bludgeon leads the Mayhem Attack Squad, obviously there's no Cybertronian word for subtle, to the Autobot Resistance Base, where our heroes prepare to leave, and we get a reference to the Transformers' god, Primus. You know, that's the first time I've heard someone cite the Transformers' legendary progenitor in many a year. I'd forgotten we had a god. Well, you know how it is, you buy a god from the store, say you'll get a lot of use out of it, but then you stick it in a cabinet and forget you ever got it. Bludgeon disrupts the interface to the dimensional portal upon his attack, and the Mayhem Attack Squad, along with our trio of heroes, end up not on Earth, but in the tunnels near the center of Cybertron itself. As established, Cybertron is a planet that's entirely mechanical, but in the exact center is not a molten core, but Primus himself. And thus issue 61, at long last, provides the origin story of the Transformers. An attendant to Primus, some kind of keeper who watches over the sleeping head in the wall, explains the origins to Grimlock, who demands proof that this actually is Primus. He says that in the early days of the universe, there were gods of light and darkness, and that age eventually died out as regular life began to emerge. Before Primus could become one with the Force or whatever, he needed to slay one final dark god, the Chaos Bringer, Unicron. The battle eventually forced the two to change into pure energy and fall into two asteroids. On Primus's asteroid, he reshaped it into Cybertron, growing metal and machine all over the place, and creating the Transformers to be the last line of defense should Unicron emerge. He instilled his life essence into the creation matrix, which has been passed down throughout the ages since then. The matrix, according to his attendant, is the only thing that can destroy Unicron. And of course, Unicron reshaped the asteroid he was on into one of metal as well, but instead he took the form of the planet-eating destroyer we all know and love. Unicron now flies through the universe seeking Primus, who sleeps until he judges the Transformers ready to do battle. However, the civil war between Autobots and Decepticons has stagnated their development. Unfortunately, that's when the Mayhem Attack Squad finds them and kills the Keeper just to attack the Autobots. However, with his dying breath, he tells the Autobots that Primus can't be awakened. It'd be a huge signal flare to Unicron. Meanwhile, Scorponok is trying to explain to his forces why he let Starscream rejoin them after, he killed half of them. Although clearly he's doing better on the rebuild his forces front than the Autobots were, since this is where we see that Soundwave is alive again. Just saying, Soundwave, this is your chance to finally show everyone what an awesome leader you can be. Scorponok says that they need the additional help until reinforcements from Cybertron arrive, since the Decepticon Micromasters were actually working for Megatron, and he'd prefer to keep Starscream on a short leash where they can keep an eye on him. Or, you could find a way to restrain and reprogram him. It's obviously not impossible to do so, since Ratchet was able to.
The angry silence that follows is all the answer the listening Starscream needs. He recognizes seeds of dissent and rebellion, and knows exactly how to sow them correctly, so he can reap the rewards.
Scorponok is not fit to be your leader! After all, he let Starscream back on the team! I, Starscream, would never let Starscream rejoin us, which is why I should be the new leader!
Back on Cybertron, they manage to fight without waking up Olmec, but Bludgeon shoots at Grimlock's back. The shot doesn't hurt him, but it ricochets off and hits Primus right in the face. The end of a slumber of eons is heralded by a scream that shatters audio sensors.
You shot me in the face! Ow!
Our heroes get transported to Earth, but of course the damage is done. Unicron now knows where Cybertron is, and thus issue 62 begins the Matrix Quest storyline. It seems that the Creation Matrix has a tangible form that Optimus would carry on his body, in his chest actually, which is kinda weird since Prime's decapitated head was able to use it, but whatever. Maybe that's only the case when it's the regular Marvel Universe that has Spider-Man running around on it too. The problem is, the other Autobots didn't know about that, and thus when they shot Optimus's original body out into space in issue 26, they were inadvertently sending the Matrix away too. And thus groups of Autobots are sent out to try to locate it, allowing some individual issues to do some genre parodies. This issue is all about film noir and a Maltese Falcon homage. Issue 63 is a Western with a twist, but the important details of these two issues is that Thunderwing has learned of the Matrix Quest and is now seeking it out himself. Issue 64, we have a Moby Dick pastiche with an Autobot pretender, who looks like an alien walrus for some reason, that goes insane and tries to hunt a space whale that's been touched by the Matrix. In turn, we learn Thunderwing's motivation, that he feels an innate affinity for the Matrix and wants to be the first Decepticon to possess it. Issue 65 has the team of Bumblebee, Jazz, and Grimlock finally locate the planet where Optimus's body crashed, but it seems the Creation Matrix is alive and curious about life, altering life forms that come across it, with disastrous results. The issue is an homage to Alien, mostly in mood. In the meantime, we have another long-awaited return after a 2-year absence. In Blackpool, who should emerge from the water and kill a fisherman but Shockwave?
I heard that Megatron had returned, and thus I must reclaim leadership from him because of how logical I am.
Soon, an Autobot shuttle returns to the Ark, Prime expecting it to be his companions, but no, it's Thunderwing, who managed to acquire the Matrix, leading us into the finale of the quest in issue 66. To remind us what this is all about, Unicron destroys a world and takes 3 robots, reformatting them into new toys.
I have searched my futures for an agent, one whom I can send before me to wreak havoc among the creations of Primus. I have found him.
I'm the ninja consultant for the Decepticons.
With the power of the Matrix, Thunderwing easily rips through the Autobots on the Ark, and the efforts to take him down just empower the Matrix itself to take more direct control of him. It seems that it's corrupting, wanting new experiences through its holders, and enjoying killing and maiming. Meanwhile, I guess Shockwave swam from Blackpool to New Jersey according to this panel, since he finds Scorponok's new base, as well as Starscream emerging from it at night for nefarious purposes. The Autobots manage to destroy Thunderwing, but the Matrix is lost too, presumably. Optimus is hopeful they'll still find a way to stop Unicron. After all, they all have a little piece of Primus inside all of them. And I'm sure that tiny piece of Primus will be excellent seasoning when Unicron eats you all. Issue 67 takes an interesting turn. We cut to the far-off future of 2009, and America has been devastated. Man, the old Brawl video took a dark turn in this timeline. On that note, this is indeed an alternate future that more matches the cartoon's timeline. But not entirely. In this case, Cybertron was lost to Unicron. He still created Galvatron, Rodimus Prime and all that happened, though Rodimus is now dead in this timeline, and Galvatron destroyed most of North and South America. Unicron's servants from the normal Marvel timeline find Galvatron and take him back to their version of events, allowing the remaining humans and Autobot forces some hope in their alternate future. Definitely a good done-in-one that will contribute to things. Not sure why this was done, I admit. It's possible they wanted some focus on Galvatron for the toys, but this was 1990. Aside from some odd decisions for reruns like quote-unquote Season 5 or Generation 2, the show had been off the air for a few years, and the Galvatron toy was a few years old now. Why bring him in at this point? And why in this particular method instead of just reformatting Megatron into Galvatron like it happened in the movie? In the meantime, issue 68 catches us up on several things we haven't seen in a while, like BlackRock, Circuit Breaker, and just humanity in general. RAT has disbanded now that the United Nations Security Council has acknowledged the two different sides in the war. BlackRock, as such, is assembling a team of superpowered humans to combat the Decepticons. Because if we can't protect the Earth, you can be damn well sure we'll transform it. The Earth is a transformer? No, that ever happened before in this franchise? The issue is about recruiting a guy who can summon volcanoes from nowhere and everyone wants him. BlackRock, obviously, for his team, later referred to as the Neo Knights. Circuit Breaker wants some help destroying all robots. And actually, Starscream of all wants help in taking out Scorponok, becoming a power master with this guy as the battery. BlackRock eventually convinces him and Circuit Breaker to join up, pointing out that she's burning herself out on her crusade and becoming less and less human than even the robots she wants to destroy. Starscream, on the other hand, gets an offer from Shockwave to join him instead. Furman had hoped to spin the Neo Knights off into their own series in the Marvel Universe, with the Transformers stuff being explained away as a training program for them to prepare them to fight stuff like Ultron or Sentinels. The pitch even included new, more 90s costumes for them. I'd say there's probably something there for this sort of team, especially with the increased cyberpunk aesthetic of 90s stuff, but let's face it, it'd probably be pretty generic and lame. It's not helped that Circuit Breaker is the only team member who actually had an interesting look to her, though the pitch artwork also indicates that she finally got some clothes and shoulder pads. Anyway, over to issue 69. The Autobots learn that there's a chance that Ratchet was inside of the travel portal when the explosives went off, so they begin seeking out Ratchet in the dimensional space between a portal's entry and exit. In the meantime, the time-displaced Galvatron is brought to Unicron.
Galvatron, speak with your mind.
Of all the times, of all the scientific principles this series has been violating, this is when they suddenly decided, oh yeah, there's no air in space. They're gonna have to speak telepathically. Since it's still going to take a few more issues for Unicron to reach Cybertron, he wants Galvatron to go ahead of him and make sure that any efforts to combat him are destroyed. If he agrees, he'll send him back to his own timeline when this is all over. Prime, in the meantime, has a gambit that he's going to pull. Prime has said that the Civil War has stopped their development and thus hampered their efforts to be ready for Unicron. And thus Prime has decided that he's going to approach Scorponok and offer unconditional surrender. I'd go for the conditional surrender. You know, say you'll only surrender if he helps defeat Unicron. Otherwise, you run the risk of him saying, I'm a headmaster and my human part ain't from Cybertron. Screw you, thanks for the surrender, idiot. Of course, Prime has some other distractions than the surrender plan. For one, Grimlock steals the bodies of the other Dinobots to try a procedure that could resurrect them or drive them mad. But then the probe looking for Ratchet finally locates him and brings him through the portal. Problem is, well kids, have some good old-fashioned nightmare fuel.
Jesus Christ!
Okay, issue 69? This is not nice. See, this is what happens when you don't do the fusion dance correctly.
Do you like our Halloween costume? We're going as John Carpenter's The Thing!
How not to make a Megazord? I think Peridot's experiments with gem mutants may have gotten a bit out of hand.
Enterprise. What we got back didn't live long, fortunately.
Hey, check it out. It's the ending to Sadako versus Kayako. Hey, remember how, 14 issues ago this comic was about Autobots doing professional wrestling?
Ratchet and Megatron! Oh, F this, you're on your own!
I'm at the Ratchet, I'm at the Megatron, I'm at the combination Ratchet and Megatron. And for my final joke on this bit, presenting in their one-man show version of Akira, Ratchet and Megatron, everybody! Yeah, not gonna show you the cover to issue 70, which is a close-up of their combined faces, because I suspect I'd be demonetized very quickly. Robot or not, this is gruesome. Issue 70 is great, as it has parallel stories occurring. The Autobots trying to figure out what to do with Well, we'll call them Ratchetron for now, while Grimlock is confronted with the possible outcome of his attempted resurrection of the Dinobots, that the nucleon that would be used could be a fate worse than death. In the end, Grimlock decides to proceed, just as Optimus chooses to separate the two, though it will mean that Megatron will have to be saved as well. Issue 71 begins with Optimus' surrender. Kup from the movie in Season 3 has been a recurring presence in these last few issues, and has especially taken umbrage with Prime's decision here.
We have no option. No? Well, I remember an Optimus Prime who would have found an option. An Optimus Prime who didn't know the meaning of the word surrender.
Your weapon.
Have it.
All talk, no shock.
The problem is, as I said, despite even Bludgeon and the Mayhem Attack Squad having arrived and confirmed the story to him, Scorponok thinks that Unicron is just a myth. And of course, things aren't really going any better because Shockwave and Starscream have gathered some Decepticons and plan to attack Scorponok and take back control, believing Scorponok to have screwed over their mission of gathering energy. Oh yeah, and Galvatron is now on Cybertron and spreading the good word of Unicron by attacking the Autobot resistance.
All in all, today's been a bit of a bummer, hasn't it, sir?
Optimus, Kup, and Hot Rod escape from custody when Scorponok keeps delaying their talks, taking Zarek prisoner.
Foolish Autobot! I am a master of Metallicato, the forbidden Cybertronian art of combat.
Fortunately, Kup is a master of the forbidden human art of running you over. Eventually, Scorponok sees reason and is ready to unite, but then Shockwave's forces attack, leading us into issue 72. As the Decepticons start their battles with each other, and Scorponok gets a chance to cut loose and show just how powerful he is, we learn that Galvatron actually plans to betray Unicron and destroy him, learning that he could be stopped if all Cybertronians unite. He believes Primus can be the key to that. Meanwhile, the Decepticon Civil War spills over into Manhattan, forcing the president to authorize the Neo-Knights to engage, bringing us to issue 73. Naturally, this whole situation has gone from bad to worse, especially as the Autobots need to actually help the Decepticons against the Neo-Knights. Plus, Circuit Breaker still doesn't care about the distinction. But fortunately, she actually does do them all a favor, since she recognizes Shockwave as the one who originally fried her neural system and takes him down. However, Galvatron succeeds in awakening Primus and explains the situation to it. As such, Primus uses its power to teleport all the Transformers, plus the Neo-Knights for some reason, to Cybertron. And sadly, the issue ends with the reveal that the Matrix, thought destroyed, is still alive, and now wants revenge. In issue 74, Primus speaks to everyone assembled about Unicron and his history with it. My power is limited. You are all that stands between Unicron and the Void. No pressure or anything. The Dinobots were not among those teleported back, and they returned to the Ark. Grimlock had used the nucleon on himself to see if it was safe to use on his compatriots, and while it hasn't driven him mad, he's been having weird pain spasms since then. He also plans to use the nucleon on the other disabled Transformers, not realizing that he's also reactivating Megatron with it. Back with our heroes, Circuit Breaker has gone into a state of shock upon realizing that she's on an entire planet full of robots, her trauma overwhelming her. Primus disappears before they can ask to teleport the humans back to Earth, and we even get some interesting character development for Scorponok, who admits to Prime in private that he's scared to die and is seeing so many forces around them gathering to kill him. Major kudos on this. We've been seeing a slow arc form for Scorponok throughout Furman's run. He's still the bad guy, but we've actually seen some nuance to him that we don't normally get from other leaders among the Decepticons. After a pep talk from Prime, the issue focuses on the new alliance having to fight servants of Unicron, possessed Transformers that worship him and want to kill Optimus Prime since he's chosen to lead everyone. After the battle, Optimus doubles over in pain, something that's happened a few times before, but no time to deal with that. Unicron has arrived, leading into the double-sized 75th issue. Unicron just starts ripping out chunks of the planet to eat. Even Optimus Prime has realized that they're dealing with a frickin' planet.
So big! So impossibly big! We can't fight that!
Quick, somebody find a teenage girl named Unicron to blame all this on! Shockwave has his own commentary. Hypothesis. I have no hypothesis. This is beyond analysis, beyond logic. My vast data grid simply cannot compute.
Sorry, Venkman. I'm terrified beyond the capacity for rational thought.
Let those two lines side by side be a preview of things to come later this year. Galvatron launches an attack on Unicron, which inspires the Autobots and Decepticons to finally counterattack. The Neo-Knights put up a good fight too, but again, they're trying to fight a planet. Only Circuit Breaker stands a chance, and Blackrock decides to break her out of her trauma by slapping her and telling her the robots are laughing at her. Our longest lasting human hero, everybody! The Ark arrives with the revived Autobots, and of course Grimlock gets to be badass even while Scorponok is killed. The Matrix arrives, still possessing Thunderwing, but even though it's been corrupted, it attacks Unicron as well, wanting to destroy the Transformers itself. However, that same corruption allows Unicron to rip through the Matrix's weird energy form. Optimus reclaims the Matrix's physical form and ejects High Q from himself. Unicron reverts back to his planet form to properly devour Cybertron, only to find himself stopped in his tracks by Circuit Breaker. If you're gonna do something, Prime, do it now and make it count! All the progress I'd made towards curing Circuit Breaker is gone! I bought you this chance! With her sanity! Yeah, you were really making progress with her, what with her yelling that she was going to destroy them all and said all robots were alike when she got involved in this battle a few issues ago. GB Blackrock, licensed therapist right here. And as Blaster, no doubt, is blaring The Touch, Optimus flies with the Matrix into Unicron, using the light of life and goodness to utterly destroy it. And thus the Unicron saga ends, but with 5 issues to go for the book. We have yet another slaughter of Autobots and Decepticons with Unicron's attack, though ironically a lot are ones who survived the Underbase saga's slaughter, right when a bunch of Transformers killed from that come back online. In issue 76, it turns out Prime is still alive, just barely, his body even more mangled than ever before. He still dies, but not before trying to tell them to make Grimlock understand something. In the meantime, High Q has finally understood why Optimus was having those pain spasms, that the Power Master process was changing, evolving them into something greater. Meanwhile, apparently they've interpreted Prime's final message, or maybe we just didn't hear it all, but Prowl did, to mean that Prime wanted Grimlock to be the new Autobot leader. Oh, yeah, sure, I mean, it worked out so great last time. Can't wait to see how big his crown is this time. He also said that Prime wanted him to understand that their enemies are living beings and they must only kill as a last option. It's what sets them apart from the Decepticons. It's kind of the main point of the issue, Grimlock needing to accept that idea. He actually gets pretty philosophical about the conflict between the two forces before he changes how he views it all. We also learn that the Nucleons seizing him up was actually the first stage of a change. He's become stronger, but now lacks the ability to transform, promoting a toy line called the Action Masters, where they're just their robot modes. Which, yeah, is kind of an interesting idea, except it kind of defeats the entire point of the franchise. High Q also starts referring to himself as Optimus Prime, but let's table that as we enter issue 77. Bludgeon has become the new leader of the Decepticons. Shockwave and Starscream are trying to repair the Ark and escape, and unfortunately, there's bad news. Cybertron has been experiencing quakes since the end of Unicron, and they have a theory, namely that Primus was the bonding force holding the planet together, and now that he's basically died in the battle with Unicron, the planet is tearing itself apart, and they have to evacuate. The Neo-Knights, along with High Q, are loaded onto a ship, Circuit Breaker pretty much catatonic, while High Q says that they can't leave, that they have to wake the last Autobot, and that they're wrong about what's happening to Cybertron. Meanwhile, the Decepticons blast off in their own ships. I guess it was pretty easy to evacuate the entire planet in a short amount of time, but Bludgeon makes it clear that he has no intention of following through on the Alliance or just settling on a new barren world. They're gonna go out and conquer, start a new empire, and they've sabotaged the Autobots' ships. So they're now stranded on Cybertron. Shockwave and Starscream plan to take the Ark back to Earth to conquer it, but Galvatron stows away so he can do it. Until he's confronted by a resurrected Megatron. Issue 78 begins with Galvatron attacking Megatron, ranting in his own madness about how he'll break the cycle by destroying Megatron before he can become Galvatron.
Wait! Have you ever heard of the Ship of Theseus? It is time to exorcise the past. If you are the disease that plagues me, Megatron, you must be torn out. This is Unicorn. The Ship of Theseus will soon be a part of me.
Megatron's not exactly doing so hot himself. disoriented, confused, and messed up after being the thing with two heads, so he's actually seeing Galvatron as Ratchet. Back on Cybertron, Grimlock was smart enough to not trust the Decepticons and stole a few of their ships, which are in perfect working order. In the meantime, Galvatron suddenly realizes that trying to kill his past self, even in an alternate timeline, is a really stupid idea, both for potential time travel paradoxes, but also just because, well, he has no actual reason to do it. Ratchet also emerges, revitalized, but he soon realizes that while their bodies have been separated, his mind is still linked to Megatron's. Meanwhile, Haikyuu explains to Blackrock what's up. The Power Master process actually started fully merging Haikyuu with Optimus. He was ejected before the process could be finished, physically becoming him. Their minds are merged though, hence Haikyuu and Optimus are now the same person. Starscream and Shockwave, investigating the disturbance below, find Megatron and Ratchet. Shockwave elects to deal with Megatron, while Ratchet gives Starscream a well-deserved punch for trivializing life so much. Trivializing is one way of describing mass murder. Galvatron saves Megatron, and the two decide to team up to conquer the universe. Ratchet, seeing all this through the link, decides to break the chain, detonating the nucleon and blasting the Ark so that it starts spiraling down to Earth to crash and kill them all. Issue 79 cuts to 6 days later, where Spike Witwicky has arrived at the crashed Ark up in northern Canada. Galvatron survived the crash and now runs rampant, and Spike forgot all about his character development with Fortress Maximus and is now pissy that he has to resume the war and all. And thus he brings Fortress Maximus back online.
Canada calls to ask, what are you guys doing up there?
Meanwhile, the Neo-Knights have escaped the shuttle with Haikyuu to find the last Autobot, a being created by Primus as Cybertron's ultimate guardian and who will decide the fate of the planet. Yes, he forgot to set his alarm clock, since for a guardian of Cybertron, he slept through the whole Unicron thing. While Spike and Fort Max resolve their issues, again, and defeat Galvatron, the Decepticons invade the peaceful planet of Klo, easily defeating the populace. However, they soon realize that the Autobots are coming and make plans for their arrival. And issue 79 draws to a close with the humans locating the last Autobot, and bringing us to the final issue of Marvel's Transformers, number 80 in a 4-issue miniseries. The book was canceled due to low sales, and it's understandable. It was 1991, and the franchise was not exactly in the best shape at that point, especially since the comic had started right when the TV show was starting up, and that was long since over with. Although hilariously, low sales in the 90s was 70,000 copies ordered, which nowadays, those numbers would mean that while it's not topping the sales charts, it's still pretty damn successful. The Autobots were immediately ambushed when they arrived on Klo, most of them killed save for Grimlock, Prowl, Blaster, the Dinobots Slag, and Cup. Prowl goes on a rant about Grimlock's crappy leadership, which feels like the gajillionth time he's done so since Grimlock took command, but fortunately the Decepticons arrive and shut him the hell up. Meanwhile, help finally arrives. The Neo-Knights and Action Master Optimus Prime. The group were flown in by the last Autobot, who I just realized his face is the Autobot logo. Nice touch. And he explains how he was awoken by Haikyuu and used his powers to recreate Optimus's body around him. The last Autobot wants the war to finally frickin' end, but Bludgeon is stubborn, believing that the legends of the last Autobot were actually about a great warrior and ravager of worlds. Still, if he's gonna be a dick, our heroes quickly deal with the Decepticons as the last Autobot resurrects those killed in the ambush. The Decepticons retreat to fight another day, and Prime reveals that Cybertron wasn't destroyed, it was just in the process of recreating itself in the wake of losing Primus. With the help of the last Autobot, it is now stabilized. They'll help the Closians rebuild their world, bring the Neo-Knights back to Earth, and then finally go home in victory. The ending is a bit rushed, of course, but that doesn't make it any less great. Despite some bizarre turns and some poor decisions made by the higher-ups, Marvel's Transformers series is fantastic. Like ROM, it's a wonderful space opera, a great telling of the Generation One story that, while not entirely serialized, still feels like a complete story after 80 issues. Highs and lows, great character moments, and some wonderfully silly diversions throughout. It's a great combination of action, superheroics, introspection, horror, western, and the price of war and peace alike. It's certainly not a perfect comic, but damn if it wasn't fun to revisit. An attitude that apparently others agreed with, for we are not done yet with this retrospective. Come back next week for the conclusion as we look at Marvel's attempt to continue the story with Generation 2, and the 2012 return to the story with Regeneration One. Hello and welcome to Atop the Fourth Wall, where bad comics burn. Marvel That Meets the Eye concludes with the follow-ups to Marvel's Transformers series over the years. Some were disappointed that I wouldn't be covering Transformers 84 as part of this retrospective. Well, that's for two reasons. One, as you can see, this retrospective has gotten longer than I would have preferred. And two, when I decided to do this retrospective, I didn't know it existed. I'm normally just a Big 2 follower and just a casual Transformers fan, so I didn't know that for the 35th anniversary of the comic, IDW published a one-shot prequel to the Marvel series, then following it up with another 4-issue prequel under the same moniker, with the subtitle Secrets and Lies. The original one-shot went into details about both the original mission of the arc, as well as explaining events from the Man of Iron two-parter originally published in the UK books and then reprinted in the US. Thing is, I'm not particularly fond of that two-parter or the stuff they introduced there about another Autobot expedition in the 11th century that crashed in England. Side note, what the hell is it about Earth that makes most Transformers in this continuity crash on it instead of land safely? The number 0 one-shot is frustrating for me for one big reason. It says that Optimus Prime deliberately lured Megatron out as a suicide action. Deliberately get their ship to crash in the hopes of destroying him, seeing him as the real threat to Cybertron's future. Sorry, but I just have to call bullcrap on that. Even forgetting Optimus Prime being as noble a leader in general, I especially do not see the Optimus Prime of the Marvel continuity being willing to sacrifice all the other Autobots on the Ark just to take down Megatron. Remember, this is the dude who thought he deserved to die for accidentally killing NPCs in a video game. Sure, maybe you could argue character development. He changed and wasn't willing to do that sort of thing in the future. Just the level of deception and immorality for such an act seems antithetical to who Optimus Prime is as a character. Just no. That being said, the miniseries is mostly decent, expanding on ideas like the strap an engine to Cybertron to make it fly around the universe thing, or introducing Ultra Magnus into the continuity despite not being a character in the Marvel book. Other stuff like the origin of the Dinobots versus Shockwave fight and trying to fill in plot holes from that just adds some new ones to me when it suggests that Grimlock went back to the Ark and then had to fight the Ark's computer, which then activated antimatter in Megatron or something. It's just weird and unnecessary in my opinion. But overall, I'd say it's pretty good and worth a read if you're interested in this continuity. Speaking of that continuity, that brings us back to what we're really here to talk about. In 1991, when the Marvel Transformers series ended, Simon Furman wrote in the letters page that the Transformers franchise was pretty much dead and gone. And in his defense, he wasn't entirely wrong. No American show, no comic, the American toy line was pretty much canceled after Action Masters, and Beast Wars was still a long way off from being a thing. However, the toys were still being released in other parts of the world, and the success of European sales convinced Hasbro to try the franchise again with Generation 2 in 1993. The toys were a combination of redecos of old stuff, new versions of old stuff, and eventually stuff that would become standards of the line, in particular ball joints for limbs. This right here is Strafe, a Generation 2 Cyberjet. It's actually the Transformers toy I've owned the longest. Hell, as a kid, I didn't even know its name. I have no idea where it came from, I've just always had it, and later when I started collecting Transformers as a teen, was disappointed that the toys didn't have as much posability as Strafe. Generation 2's attempt at a TV show wasn't. It was just the original cartoon, but now with really stupid CGI transitions and frames, referred to as the Cybernet Space Cube, that ended up screwing with the editing of the show. Just imagine that whenever I switch from live action to the comic panels or whatever, I suddenly have to shrink it. Where have I been? But while there wasn't a new TV show, there was a new comic. They actually did produce a UK comic like the original Marvel series, but it only lasted 5 issues due to low sales. Produced by Fleetway, since Marvel UK had collapsed by that point. In the US though, they once again turned to Marvel to produce the Generation 2 comic. Because this was the 90s, the age of the speculator boom, and the fact that the original book had been cancelled due to low sales, they were only contracted for a 12-issue maxi series, with the option for more if it was successful enough. It wasn't. Let's dig into Transformers Generation 2 and see how that turned out. To build some hype for Generation 2, Marvel decided to have some lead up to the book, in the pages of G.I. Joe, specifically issues 138 to 142. It's a few years after the events of the original comic, and who should show up at a Cobra base but Megatron, having survived the crash of the Ark at the end of the book. He apparently spent a few years repairing the Ark and hiding it in the Canadian Arctic, but apparently spent no time on his own maintenance. And I guess Spike never bothered to tell anyone about the crashed Ark, nor did any Canadian authorities detect it crashing. It's kinda hilarious that my clip from MST3K last week shows more sense than this book.
Canada calls to ask, what are you guys doing up there?
Anyway, Megatron makes a deal with Cobra, rebuild his body and give him a scientist, Dr. Biggles Jones, and he'll give them the advanced Cybertronian technology of the Ark. And none of them asked, hey, didn't we already have a deal with you guys a few years ago? What even happened to you? I heard you guys made a vacation resort that was also an island nation. We made our own island nation once too, you know. They rebuild him in his Generation 2 body, now a tank instead of a gun because of concerns about a kid's toy looking like a realistic weapon, and he eventually just screws over Cobra by taking off with Biggles Jones in the Ark, which really means that this issue should have been called Biggles and the Menace from Space. So yeah, we're directly continuing on from the first Marvel series. Which is funny because according to Simon Furman in the letters page, this book is explicitly not supposed to be a continuation. A fresh start was needed, and that's how we approached the book. Everything I thought I knew about Transformers went out the window. Yeah, it's as much of a fresh start as Steven Universe Future was from Steven Universe. You could have labeled this number 81 and I would have believed it. The only thing they really leave unexplained is that Grimlock can transform again despite losing that ability from the Action Master process. But we can imagine that with the resources of Cybertron now in the hands of the Autobots, they can figure out how to repair that. Also, unlike the original, you don't have to expect individual issues devoted to new toys that Hasbro wants in. Sure, Generation 2 toys are promoted, as seen with Megatron, but it's not going to suddenly interrupt the action to see, like, Strafe joining a baseball team or something. He'd be really good at it too. The built-in missiles work as natural baseball bats. There's a 0th issue to Generation 2, reprinted at the end of the second issue for some reason, but it's not really relevant to the overall story, so let's move on to the first proper issue. I actually reviewed the first issue of Generation 2 back in 2012, and at the time, quite a few people were upset that I was bashing it. And almost a decade later, I stand by everything I said. I'm not gonna mince words here. Generation 2 sucks. There are good ideas, and it does improve as the series goes on, but the execution of those ideas is just terrible, and the pacing is a slog to get to the better parts. It's too slow, it's drawn like garbage, and I only care about what's happening because it's carrying on from the previous series. The cover, both the front and its gimmicky gatefold cover, plus a second gimmick with chrome on it, pretty much spell out most of the artistic problems right away. Transformers is dragged kicking and screaming into the 90s, with a too edgy for you line up top saying, "This is not your father's Autobot." Lots of focus on violence, pouches. Later on, they even try to make Optimus Prime more like a 90s superhero by adding the equivalent of neck muscles to him. Everyone's shooting huge, impractical guns and scowling or gritting their teeth, and there's barely any backgrounds, and it's all too busy and noisy to look at.
Dude, that's what makes it so awesome! Robots and disc guns!
But I suppose we should actually talk about the story of this stuff at some point. In issue 1, Optimus has been getting premonitions of impending doom, some ancient force slaughtering the Transformers. Despite the pacing of the book, we're actually very quickly introduced to the recurring menace of the series, a Decepticon faction led by the character G-Axis. G-Axis is interesting for two reasons. One, he's a character invented for the comics without an accompanying toy, and two, his name is a joke. Furman knew that Marvel was placing unrealistic expectations on the book's sales if it was going to stay beyond 12 issues, so with tongue planted firmly in cheek, he named the enemy G-Axis. Stay tuned for a future storyline of this show where I battle the villain, YouTube Del Eat Machinel. G-Axis explains to Prime that he and his Decepticon forces vacated Cybertron shortly after the Ark first crashed on Earth. They don't even see themselves as Decepticons anymore, but just Cybertronians, dedicated to creating a vast interstellar empire. They burn worlds along the way, draining all the resources and converting them into mini Cybertrons as they go. G-Axis finds the Autobot versus Decepticon war to be childish, long since resolved, no it wasn't, and they should be focusing their efforts on conquering more worlds and annihilating the puny fleshling infestations on them. Prime is somehow devastated by this little speech, despite it not really making any difference. The Cybertronian Empire is the offshoot, but he's all, "We're a joke and useless, we fought for nothing," as if he was forgetting and disregarding, 80 issues of story. Grimlock is actually the one who shows signs of character growth, especially in light of everything he went through, and pointing out the value of all life, a lesson that Optimus himself had tried to teach him when he died fighting Unicron. Which would be really inspiring if the artwork wasn't so utterly depressing, dreary, and washed out. We'll talk some more about G-Axis and his forces later. After the Autobots escape from him, this leads us into issue 2, which follows directly on from the G.I. Joe stuff. Spike, of all people, actually showed up near the end of the last G.I. Joe issue tie-in, but he just came out of nowhere, being a tiny part of a panel before he snuck on board the Ark. And I wouldn't have known it was Spike if he didn't call himself that in a thought cloud. In fact, the way he wasn't focused on gave the distinct impression that he showed up earlier at some point, and I had just missed it. But nope, he's just there randomly, having sensed Autobots nearby or whatever. Point is, he snuck back on board the Ark as Megatron flies it off and he heads to Fortress Maximus's body. It's not exactly in great shape, probably still damaged from the fight with Galvatron. Transformers have limited automatic repair systems, but they can only do so much. Fortunately, with the help of another Autobot who got on board, they're able to blow the Ark up and presumably kill off Megatron. However, it's at the cost of Fortress Maximus's life. Dr. Biggles Jones and the other Autobot skydive, escaping. Farewell, Spike and Fort Max. You were unceremoniously killed off in a mediocre story that said we didn't need to know continuity in order to understand why you were significant. Why was this necessary? It gets better. Hotspot, who was in pursuit of Cobra for some discarded junk that Megatron gave them, also sacrificed himself so that Cobra couldn't get any Transformer tech. Now, why was that significant, since he wasn't exactly a major character? Well, because apparently Optimus made it clear that Cobra could not be allowed to get any Transformers tech, dead or alive. Basically making it clear, if you are captured, blow yourself up. What the hell? Issue 3 might have been an interesting idea, but once again, it's the execution that ruins it. First, by setting it in media res, with the Autobot Huffer giving exposition about what happened. Was that? It was Hound giving that info? No. Well, as evidenced by when I talked about the issue with Spider-Man, I am apparently incapable of distinguishing between Hound and Huffer. Won't make that mistake again. So anyway, Cliffjumper here talks about how G-Axis pursued them after escaping his ship. Entering a nebula, both forces seem to be overwhelmed by feelings of aggression, even Optimus affected by it. Ironhide here only escaped it after getting hit in the head with a stray beam, and eventually Optimus and G-Axis realize that some alien force on the planet is compelling them to fight and make a truce between them to end the fighting. They say it's these weird shadow spider things, but personally I blame this thing. Again, Star Trek and Transformers are in the same universe, so it adds up. At the end, G-Axis thinks to himself that if the Autobots are right about all life being worthy of consideration, that would make him a butchering tyrant, which he can't accept, before ordering them to annihilate the planet's surface where these creatures call home. G-Axis, a gentle soul, not unlike the Fixer from Holy Terror. Like I said, there's a germ of a good story idea here, but the dialogue isn't very interesting. It seems to get resolved very quickly. Starting in media res for this just comes across as more confusing than anything else, not helped by a big exposition dump about what's happening by Blue Streak here. Also, for some reason, the issues began being split into 2 stories, even if they weren't really complete short stories, just a subplot or the like. So the main story was Primal Fear, but then the last 6 pages are Old Evils, which shows us what Bludgeon's Decepticons have been up to since the end of the first series. Building a gigantic war world ship, as it's called, and readying a new army of Decepticons. However, Bludgeon needs the creation matrix to give them life, so he plans to lure out Optimus Prime by attacking Earth. Does Optimus even still have the creation matrix? His corpse wasn't exactly holding it anymore after he destroyed Unicron, and the last Autobot built a new body around Haikyuu. Did he get a new one from that? Also, apologies for the quality of the skin scans of some of these comics, especially issue 3. I have 2 sets of scans of the Generation 2 comic. One is overall decent and the other not. But some issues are pretty much the same low quality. Anyway, in issue 4, Optimus's premonitions reveal more of the apocalyptic threat. Something that seems to swarm over his arm and melt it away like acid. Grimlock decides to act on his own initiative and has a team of Autobots do hit-and-run strikes on G-Axis' forces, but eventually are captured when they try to destroy his flagship. Prime rescues them and is actually impressed enough with his abilities to put him in command while he goes off on a mission, despite Grimlock's misgivings about mistakes he made during this. Issue 4 is okay, just rushed a bit, and I question Prime once again putting Grimlock in a leadership position. While he fared better his second time around at the end of the book, he still was doing stuff without Prime's authorization because he thought Prime wasn't making the right call. Anyway, can't wait to see Prowl complaining about every single thing he does again. The second story is the start of the multi-part Tales of Earth, wherein Bludgeon attacks Earth openly, killing countless people to try to attract Prime to it. However, he's stopped by Megatron and Starscream.
You have something of mine, namely the leadership of the Decepticons. I want it back over your dead body. Now, Bludgeon, Whoops!
Bludgeon, quickly! Megatron has fallen! Make me the new leader!
God, I love this stupid 90s scowling Starscream. Anyway, issue 5 brings us back to Cybertron. Prime undergoes a procedure with these sacred robed guys that will allow him to access the Matrix and see if he can make sense of his visions. Optimus sees the early days of Transformer life on Cybertron. Most importantly, he sees that once upon a time, Transformers were able to reproduce, well, for lack of a better term, asexually, a liquid form expelling out of another transformer like a kind of mitosis and forming a new robot. The process is called budding, and this is where we get the in-story justification of the series title, describing G-Axis and his forces as the next generation of Transformers. It's a little vague on details in this issue, but the idea seems to be that every Transformer has a part of Primus inside them, but the budding distills that amount of Primus a little bit more. There's a maximum amount of Transformers that can be around before those who come about are corrupted and lack Primus's own light and morality. Hence, G-Axis' generation are bad. However, what Prime doesn't see, because he ends the vision before seeing it in full, is that it got even worse. More and more budding occurred until there's so little of Primus that the energy that is formed within these Transformers is utterly corrupt, forming into new life and separating itself from Transformers to leave Cybertron and Moss. Like I said, I think Generation 2 has some good ideas, and this is one of them not properly explored. This whole new generation of Transformers thing. Recall that in the original Marvel series, Primus stated that the war between Autobots and Decepticons had stagnated their development. A group of Cybertronians who left millions of years ago and were allowed to continue to evolve away from the war, only for that evolution to actually be a bad thing? There's potential there, either because of their separation from Cybertron and Primus himself, or just because Primus didn't realize that the path he wanted them on, to ultimately fight Unicron, was actually rife with danger of becoming the very darkness he fought. Unfortunately, it instead takes the attitude, according to Optimus, that Primus actively resisted this form of procreation, erasing its existence from their collective memory. There's also an iffy eugenics argument to be made with this about population control, nature versus nurture, admittedly a little more complicated because these are robots, but still, Grimlock has changed since his original tyrannical days, seeing one form of people as less because of the way they were born, etc. There are ideas here that certainly warrant some cool exploration, but the way they're presented is overly simplistic and questionable, especially when we've already got a group of pretty much evil robots that aren't even part of this distillation thing. Yeah, G-Axis and the Cybertronian Empire are positioned to be a different type of enemy than normal Decepticons, but in practice, they're really no different than Megatron or Thunderwing or any of the other Empire-building Decepticons. Just they say, well, we're special because we don't call you Autobots. Speaking of, Bludgeon is impressed by Megatron and Starscream. You should have stayed dead.
We suffer from a disquieting knack, Megatron and I, of refusing to do just that. Ratchet, though, screw him, he's still dead.
Yeah, we never get an explanation how these two survived the destruction of the Ark. especially Starscream, who I guess Megatron repaired again in the meantime on the side while fixing the Ark. Megatron destroys Bludgeon, who puts up a good fight. Despite Megatron ripping off his Pretender shell head, he still keeps on blasting, and once more becomes leader. In issue 6, as Megatron tours Warworld and decides to stick with Bludgeon's plan to lure out Prime, Soundwave, still purple even in Gen 2, asks him why the hell he brought back Starscream.
His record of treachery and deceit is legend. He has betrayed you many times.
Actually, technically in the Marvel continuity, he never really did. He got blown up by a Mega Supreme, revived and worked for Ratbat, was resurrected by Megatron, who then seemingly died. He betrayed Scorponok and then died again on the Ark. Sure, he tried to undermine Megatron, but technically he's never betrayed him.
You are, of course, quite right, Soundwave. Starscream is a backstabbing miscreant who will attempt to seize power at the first opportunity. However, he has served me well thus far, providing much-needed mobility after the Ark was destroyed and bolstering our surface troops.
Look, Megatron, just admit you got a crush on the doofus. It's the only explanation at this point why you keep bringing him back. Prime heads to Earth alone since he wants to join forces with Megatron to fight G-Axis, but Megs isn't listening, just ripping open Prime's chest and stealing the Matrix before Grimlock arrives with backup. On an alien world, though, a black cloud of creatures arrives and kills off some nomadic aliens before flying off, identified as the Swarm, the creatures that the Cybertronians evolved into after several generations of budding. In issue 7, a force of Decepticon scouts that Megatron sent out into space are destroyed by G-Axis, including poor Skullgrin. Dude finally apologized and worked to make amends and stop being racist, and had a new career in TV going before this happened. Tragic, really. And Megatron decides to confront the second-generation Transformers himself, rallying his troops to say that they're just upstarts using the Decepticon banner.
Death! Rip! Tear!
Wait, was Doomguy a Transformer?
Death to the Pretenders!
Ooh, awkward thing to say when this crowd shot features a bunch of pretenders. This plan does not go well. G-Axis' fleet is enormous and quickly overwhelms the Warworld, killing a bunch of them. Megatron tries to fight G-Axis himself, and he just rants at Megs about how he's an evolutionary throwback and wants them to be forgotten. Megatron gets blasted and crashes on a planet, a bunch of Decepticons soon finding him. He's alive, but only just barely, brought back to the injured Optimus Prime, half destroyed and finally ready to talk, leading into issue 8. G-Axis makes a speech saying he's sick of the Autobots continually interfering. Yeah, most of that happened off-panel, it would seem. And that they're going on a crusade to exterminate all non-Transformer life, along with the Autobots themselves. Megatron and Prime agree to a temporary alliance, defeating one of G-Axis' attacks on some space amoebas. Unfortunately, that's when Starscream goes missing to go do a treason. This is my surprised face. In issue 9, as the Swarm begins descending on worlds where G-Axis' forces are attacking aliens and consuming them, Starscream meets up with G-Axis to join forces, offering Optimus and Megatron. An examination of an attack by the Swarm on another planet— wait, is that Tom Servo? Crotty Robot?
Horrid lumps of discharge destroyed beautiful innocent robots with impunity, laughing all the way.
The attack reveals to our heroes the existence of the Swarm, but that discussion gets tabled when they're attacked by the Cybertronian Empire. Issue 10 reveals that, of course, Starscream is responsible for revealing their whereabouts and giving G-Axis the tactical information about the Warworld and their defenses. And I guess nobody thought, maybe we should adjust those in case the well-known traitor who just disappeared decided to go off and be a traitor. The Autobots and Decepticons were able to start fighting back despite surprise, superior firepower, and superior numbers, much to G-Axis' shock. And it kind of makes sense. He chalks it up to guile and bloody-mindedness, but the thing is, the Cybertronian Empire is used to just using sheer numbers to overcome enemies, very few of whom are probably capable of mounting an adequate defense. The Autobots and Decepticons, by contrast, are made up of forces who have been constantly at war for 4 million years. Sure, Prime and Megatron themselves were out of action for most of that, but plenty of their troops weren't, and even then their tactics have evolved because of the constant struggle. They know how to turn the tide against bad odds because they've had to do so again and again. Still, when all you've got is a hammer, everything looks like a nail, so G-Axis is just like, send everything! Every single last one of our forces to destroy them and end this!
Why? That's what they all asked me. Why him? Why Starscream? Why, of all Decepticons, did I decide to revitalize the one whose record of deceit and betrayal is legend? Because I'm an idiot, that's why.
Hey, you said it, not us. But I'll say it now anyway, you're an idiot, Megatron. Still, the odds are getting too much for our heroes, and Optimus— oh my god, Optimus, what's wrong with your neck? Anyway, Optimus realizes that if Warworld falls into enemy hands, then they could get hold of the Matrix. Wait, they've been allies for a while now. Why didn't he put the Matrix back inside himself? But yeah, they're too late. Starscream being Starscream, he goes for the Matrix. Meanwhile, the Swarm takes some of G-Axis' ships and, learning of the signal recalling everyone to Earth, decides to go there too. Optimus and Megatron arrive at the Warworld, but with the power of the Matrix, Starscream has merged with it.
Through the Matrix, I have become one with the Warworld, making it an extension of my own consciousness. I have become, in essence, a living weapon!
Don't you transform into a jet? That's a weapon too.
Well, yes, but—
And Decepticons are mighty warriors with built-in weapon systems. Hell, I used to literally be a gun.
You're missing the point!
I think the point is that saying you're a living weapon is not as impressive as being, say, cosmically powered.
In issue 11, Starscream begins to torture the two leaders for the indignities he suffered, while G-Axis, pissed that Warworld is now attacking all his forces, decides to leave and go deal with the problem himself. His subordinate, Rook, realizes that G-Axis has been losing his calm demeanor that he was supposed to have had throughout this book, getting more and more aggressive as they're continually thwarted, and decides to contact the Liege Maximo. Supposedly this is a typo and it's supposed to be Liege Maximo, but it's shocking how many times they keep doing it, even on the same page as the correct spelling. Prime and Megatron— well, I was gonna say get away from Starscream, but how one does that when they're inside of him, I couldn't really tell ya. Point is, Megatron distracts Starscream while Prime tries to contact G-Axis in the hopes of getting him to join forces with them against the Swarm. Instead, G-Axis has his forces target and annihilate San Francisco.
Yes, I could have sent this awesome destructive power on the thing that's destroying my ships, but instead I'm just going to target a human city. I'm a smart villain.
However, Warworld suddenly turns its attentions on G-Axis' ship. Starscream himself doesn't even get why he's doing it.
The fate of the Fleshlings means nothing to me! Nothing! And yet it's as if I have to protect them!
But I must save the children!
Optimus realizes that, unlike the last time the Matrix was used for evil, in this case, it's the Matrix corrupting Starscream.
Somehow, the creation Matrix is rewriting him, gradually turning evil into good.
Someone set this thing to evil.
Unfortunately, he can't really celebrate that for too long, because the Swarm has arrived, leading into the final issue of Generation 2. G-Axis orders his forces to attack the Swarm, but it just gets its attention, leading it to slaughter his forces. Starscream reluctantly surrenders the Matrix to Optimus so he can stop being consumed with helping people. While Megatron forces Starscream to help him prepare to combat the Swarm, Optimus travels to G-Axis' ship, sensing that the Swarm has an intelligence that they might be able to communicate with.
Perhaps through him, one of the original second-generation Transformers, I can contact the Swarm.
Oh yeah, just like how if you have a copy of Windows 3.1, it'll be able to more effectively communicate with Windows 10. G-Axis is not in the mood to talk, though, blaming everything falling apart on Optimus. He just beats the crap out of him, ranting and rambling how this is all his fault until the Swarm breaks through the ship. However, the Swarm does indeed respond to G-Axis challenging it, mimicking his appearance before it rips him apart. Farewell, G-Axis. I'd say you were an interesting villain, but in practice you were really just a guy who gets increasingly more pissed off as the series went on. While the Swarm descends on Earth, Optimus is surprisingly rescued by Starscream, seeming to still be suffering a bit of the effects of the Matrix on his ethics. Optimus briefly touched the mind of the Swarm and realizes that it's basically a blank slate. No morality, no direction. It's lashing out because it doesn't understand how to do anything else. Optimus heads out to the Swarm in order to be consumed. And it seems like every time Prime dies, they just want to make it more and more gruesome. Yeesh. Point is, he does so while trying to remain as calm and sane as he can, becoming part of the Swarm and, well, transforming it, distilling his sense of honor, resolve, responsibility, and nobility thanks to him still possessing the Matrix. And Optimus emerges from the swarm, reconstituted. They can create matter from what they consumed, and the swarm is sent off to be a force for life in the universe instead of destruction. Optimus makes a speech about how, as the only remaining Transformers in creation, they must use this as a second chance for something better for their people. And meanwhile, Megatron is off somewhere going, well, wonder if Cobra's hiring. However, it's revealed on the final page that plenty of the Generation 2 Transformers still exist, led by the Lege Maximo. It reveals that Negatron is one of its descendants, just as Optimus Prime is a descendant of the original Primes that first held the Matrix, and that the day of reckoning will come. No it won't. Despite the sequel tease, this was the end of Generation 2 stuff, though characters like G-Axis did get adopted into future stories and continuities. Like I said earlier, Generation 2 sucks, though it does improve near the end. The artwork getting slightly better as it goes on also helps, but only slightly. It's still a dreary read, and while it's good that we got a book that's pretty solidly focused on a smaller group of characters, what they say and do is kind of repetitive and derivative of stuff we've already had. Starscream being treacherous and achieving ultimate power, Decepticons and Autobots needing to join forces against a common foe, using the Matrix to undo damage, etc. And for a book whose conclusion is about rejecting violence, it is a very violent book. Lots of Transformers die, but we don't even have a lot of past one-off stories to care. And hell, San Francisco gets completely leveled, while several cities were said to be in flames from Bludgeon's attack, so there's an untold amount of human casualties too. This ending kinda reminds me of the end of Maximum Carnage, where Spider-Man fired a gun that shot feel-good rays to stop a wave of murderous insanity throughout people. Though as imperfect and kinda goofy as that was, I've always liked Maximum Carnage, and especially comparing it to this story, it's definitely more focused on trying to find the better parts of ourselves and stopping violence. Grimlock gets the most development though, carrying on from where he was before, and I actually quite appreciated that. There are certainly ideas here that could be explored, but the mid-90s were definitely not where they were going to be fully realized. I should note that there was technically a follow-up to this in a novella Simon Furman made and released at 2 UK conventions, but it's essentially fan fiction, so we won't get into it here. Instead, we've got another follow-up to the original continuity, Regeneration One. What I could not find was a reason why it was happening at all. It's not like 2012 was an anniversary year or something for it, but if I had to guess, probably the great sales on the IDW trades of the Marvel series. It got 2 major printings, with the second printing apparently settling all the rights issues with Marvel for their characters in it, so they wouldn't have to leave something out like they did the first time through. Simon Furman returns, but also Andrew Wildman on pencils, who had been the primary artist for a good chunk of the original book, and subsequently was responsible for giving us the nightmare that was Ratchetron. Oop, got another one. We've seen how Michael Bay makes a Transformers movie, now let's see how David Cronenberg makes one. We start things off with issue number 80.5, a free comic book day release that mostly serves as a recap of the Marvel series and setting the stage for Regeneration One. 21 years after the end of number 80, the last Autobot now spends his days as a statue. The pay is good, but getting pooped on all the time by Laserbeak is annoying. A band of dissident ex-Decepticons, led by Soundwave, take control of the Orbital Defense Network and fire directly on the last Autobot, destroying him. Damn, and he was only 3 million years away from retirement! And issue 81 starts us off proper with several storylines. Since this was 2012, pacing of the book matches what you'd find in modern comics as opposed to the 80s and 90s. Multi-parters instead of done-in-ones, beginning with loose ends. Prime has become more and more distant from the rest of the Autobots, spending time either alone or mentoring Hot Rod. Unfortunately, that separation seems to be keeping him from seeing the true depth of the growing Neo-Decepticon movement that Soundwave is leading, acts of terrorism that they've been perpetrating. Optimus doesn't want to come down hard on them out of fear of fully reigniting the war. Meanwhile, Soundwave is contacted by Bludgeon, who says he's finally ready to rejoin the Decepticon cause with a sizable military force, but he needs Soundwave to find something for him. Disgusted by Prime's lack of action, Kup decides, after all this time, to take action, leading an Autobot strike team called the Wreckers, a recurring and popular group in a lot of continuities who got their start in the Marvel UK stuff, to go to every planet touched by the Great War and destroy every trace of Decepticons out there. First stop, Earth, which, much to the shock of our heroes, has been utterly devastated. Climate change, people! This was always the end result of the Autobots and Decepticons being gas guzzlers. They can tell that Earth has been like this for a while. Evidently nobody bothered to check in on Earth in 20 years after they dropped off the Neonites, and their probes soon discover the cause, sitting on a makeshift throne in the middle of Washington, D.C. Megatron.
Thank Primus! I've been so bored I've rebuilt and destroyed Starscream 3 times now!
He launches missiles and seemingly destroys their shuttle, leading us into issue 82. Our heroes manage to avert death in escape pods, and we see that Megatron now has an army of half-destroyed, lobotomized troops, including Ratbat, shockingly enough. I guess his corpse could have been on the Ark after Scorponok blasted him, just unexpected is all. Oh, and yes, he did indeed rebuild Starscream, lobotomized like the others, but he says he kept a tinge of self-awareness as a form of torture for him.
This special torment I reserve for all who oppose or defy me. Is it that so, Ratchet?
Jesus Christ!
Yeah, Ratchet's head is mounted on the front of his little hover scooter, and he's apparently still alive. Still, gotta imagine it's better than being fused with Megatron, so... upgrade? Who knew Brother Eye was a Transformers fan? Issue 81 had mentioned this, but here's where we get properly caught up with Grimlock. Something that Furman had wanted to explore in the original Marvel run before it got cut short was that the nucleon used to revive the Dinobots wasn't going to react the same way for all of them. For Grimlock, he lost the ability to transform. Others got it worse. As such, he's on his way to Nebulos to see if they can fix the problems they all have. In the intervening time, Nebulos and Cybertron actually made a full-on peace and trade treaty. It seems that they still had the heads of those Autobots from the original Headmasters miniseries, Fortress Maximus included, and part of the treaty was to try to restore the heads to their bodies, since some of the Nebulan Headmasters were killed by Unicron. Unfortunately, Nebulos has seen better days too, as Grimlock is blasted and knocked out upon arrival. Cup gets captured by Megatron while the Wreckers try to get to an intact communication satellite to call for help, though Megatron admits he wants Optimus Prime to finally come here. They also find some humans who naturally run off upon seeing the Transformers, but they are protected by Spike Witwicky, now flying around with cybernetic enhancements and calling himself Circuit Smasher. Oh hey, they're in the DC universe now! They have legacy heroes! This leads to issue 83. After Spike's human companions convince him not to fry the Autobots, we learn what happened. Spike kept people away from the Ark for a couple years, but he couldn't stand being Fortress Maximus full-time. As such, eventually a group in 1994 got into the Ark and seemingly reactivated Megatron. He went berserk and just started blasting humanity on his own. When they tried to nuke him, he somehow had an invasive program that sent the missiles right back at the bases that launched them. He then brought about the lobotomized troops, referred to as X-Bots. Fort Max and a detailless and unnamed circuit breaker joined the fight, but by then it was too late. They arrive back at a military base and meet the leader of this ragtag force, a now wheelchair-using GB Blackrock.
I've got just one question, Autobots. Where's Optimus Prime? He owes me $50!
Earth is in ruins and there's no global economy or reason for money.
I know that, but in case you hadn't noticed, with the Earth destroyed, I don't have much else going on.
Optimus, after having admitted to Hot Rod that his rebirth kinda caused his stagnation, he was at peace after dying, only to be dragged out of the Matrix into the new body with Haikyuu, gets informed of Cup's departure and a weak distress signal reveals Megatron's presence on Earth.
Where are you, Prime? Don't you want to see what I've done to your precious planet?
That's supposed to be menacing, but it turns out he means he just put in lawn gnomes. We learn that Fort Max was killed and Spike along with him. Or rather, it was more like his brain shut down while his body remained alive. His nervous system also shot. Using the techniques that turned Josie into Circuit Breaker, combined with the Nebulan implants Spike had, they were able to turn him into Circuit Smasher. The problem they're finding in countering Megatron is the Ark. It was already an advanced piece of equipment in its day, but Megatron has been enhancing it, and even found ways to counter and resist the powers that Circuit Smasher has. He then sends a message out to the Autobots, showing them Cup infected with scraplets. It's clearly a trap, but they think this might be their opportunity to attack the Ark while Megatron's distracted. Optimus and his forces depart for Earth, leaving Hot Rod in command. With most of Cybertron's best warriors embarking on the mission, Soundwave is told by Bludgeon, who, in a nod to Generation 2, is flying around in the Warworld ship, to go on his mission. obtain the remains of Thunderwing. At this rate, it's going to turn out Zarek and Scorponok have been secretly alive this whole time. Hell, let's bring in Decepticon leaders from the cartoon next. Astro Train tried to take over the Decepticons with an army of trains once. Let's do that again. Anyway, issue 84. I was kidding! I mean, especially since this is an alternate cover to issue 83. Issue 84 is pretty much all action. Half the Wreckers, along with the humans, stage their assault on the Ark and get to the outer doors, while the other Wreckers try to retrieve Kup. They're unsuccessful, though Optimus and his forces arrive. In addition, Starscream manages to fight off the inhibitors in his brain just enough to whisper to Kup, "Kill Ratchet!" And with issue 85, we wrap things up. Megatron plans to use the Ark to launch missiles all over the planet to wipe out all remaining life, and the Cybertronians themselves, regardless of his victory or defeat. He just wants a chance to finally kill Optimus. Fortunately, Kup got the message and understood it. As we saw at the end of the series, Megatron and Ratchet's minds were still linked. Harming one harms the other. Megatron was able to use Ratchet's mind to resurrect his Decepticons, but Ratchet needed to stay alive for Megatron to stay alive. Then I probably wouldn't have put his head on the thing I'd be riding into battle. Call me overly cautious, but one good pothole and you're dead, Megs. Spike is able to enter the Ark and disable its computer, eliminating the missiles as a threat as well. With Kup killing Ratchet, Megatron and his forces fall. Meanwhile, Soundwave begins his assault on the facility housing Thunderwing's body. Well, it's revealed that indeed, Scorponok is alive on Nebulos, offering Grimlock a new body if he joins him. Just watch, people! Who's next that's gonna enter the picture? The Mechanic? The Mechanibles? The Femax Queen? Bring them all back! Form the Legion of Doom or something! Hell, we technically never did get resolution on the Mechanic. He just escaped. Oh, and lest we forget yet another villain, during all this, Galvatron rises out of the ice that Fort Max put him in. Issue 86 begins the next storyline, Natural Selection, with a flashback revealing, the Nucleon's effects on the Transformers has been a thing for at least 5 years now. Slag of the Dinobots is bestial, Blaster is in what looks like a padded cell, Inferno is apparently constantly on fire, and then there's poor Hound down there wrapped in shrink wrap. In the present, Scorponok explains that Zarek had come up with a ghost protocol that would restore his normal brain functions if the Nebulans tried to access his database and then somehow used mind control on the scientists researching his head. Meanwhile, the concern about Thunderwing's body is that it still contains some traces of the creation matrix, and thus the last tangible link to Primus, especially since the last Autobot has now become the first casualty. Hot Rod reluctantly orders the Hall vaporized to keep it out of Soundwave's hands, but he teleports away an instant before the bombs go off. On Earth, the humans unanimously vote for the Transformers to leave once they've cleaned up the bodies, which they agree to despite their offer to help rebuild what's left of humanity. They pour all the bodies in a hole to vaporize them, only for Starscream to awaken and manage to escape right before it hits. Turns out the greatest enemy in this series is bad timing. Grimlock, still feeling guilty about everything, reluctantly agrees to serve Scorponok. Scorponok is delighted, especially when he explains that he's uncovered something in Transformers CNA. CNA is short for either cyber/nano algorithms or cybernucleic acid. Like DNA, the idea is that it's the genetic code for a Transformer. Since they're not organic, it's not quite the same thing, but it's definitely the same idea for it being a unique identifier for a person as a person, containing a Transformer's hard-coded design schematics. Scorponok believes that he has discovered the Warrior gene, which determines whether a Transformer is an Autobot or Decepticon. He's developed a gene key that, in theory, will modify that gene, and thus plans to not only turn Grimlock into a Decepticon, but all of Cybertron. And like with Generation 2, this idea is a bit iffy. Not the robot DNA or whatever, but rather Autobots and Decepticons are hard-coded to being good or evil like that. Especially since, over the course of the franchise, some have switched sides before and had their morality alignment shift as well. Anyway, Starscream returns to the Ark, Galvatron also approaching as we enter issue 87. As if anticipating my critique, Scorponok points out that allegiance is not exactly that binary a choice, but his manipulations will make them more inclined to obey him and be liberated from morality. Meanwhile, Autobot scientists have finally discovered the tunnels under Cybertron that led to the Primus chamber, a fact that Hot Rod hopes will lead them to some connection to Primus now that they believe the Matrix is completely gone. Grimlock returns returns, and Hot Rod wisely shoves him in a cell when he reveals that he can transform again and intends to do the same for the other Dinobots. He can tell something is wrong. Then again, the fact that they're also so easily able to grab him and shove him in a cell should be a sign of things being even worse. Prime elects to remain on Earth as he sends the others away, believing that the last Autobot made a mistake in bringing him back. He's a relic whose time has passed, and he needs to let the next generation, led by Hot Rod, do its thing. After all, that worked out so well in the cartoon! Hot Rod goes into the tunnels, sensing his presence will be needed there. Meanwhile, Perceptor goes in to analyze Grimlock, but gets the gene key applied to him just as Scorponok's other forces arrive and begin executing his plan. And on Earth, Starscream meets up with Galvatron, though lacking the ability to speak from the lobotomy, and leads him into the AI systems of the Ark, discovering Shockwave's body hooked up to the computer. In issue 88, Scorponok returns to Cybertron and meets up with several of the Neo-Decepticons, who don't want to join up because of their allegiance to Soundwave, but he quickly turns them around on it. Soundwave is meeting up with Bludgeon on board the Warworld to show off the resources at his command, an army of drones that he hopes to bring to life with the remnants of the Matrix and Thunderwing. As more Autobots get converted by the gene key, Hot Rod eludes robot creatures found in the depths of Cybertron. I didn't mention them last time, but they came crawling out after the Unicron stuff, and ends up locating a sword. And a golden disc. My god! A laser disc! Think how many Optimus Prime brains you can hold on that thing! Grimlock is brought before Scorponok because he'd been too preoccupied looking for the Dinobots to get them new bodies to help the conversions. He demands Scorponok fulfill his end of the deal, or said deal is off, but Scorponok says Grimlock hasn't fulfilled his part yet. As such, when Grimlock makes it clear that the deal is indeed off, Scorponok disables him and prepares a device to spread the Grand Epiphany, the gene key, all across the planet at once. On Earth, Galvatron realizes that Megatron used Shockwave in his dismantling of Earth's defenses. The Ark's auto-repair systems are nearly complete for its propulsion, and as such, they can actually leave Earth. In issue 89, we see that Grimlock, wasn't disabled at all. He resumes his hunt for the Dinobots, who are currently evading the growing Decepticon forces. In the tunnels, Hot Rod realizes the two objects are the Sword of Primus and the Covenant of Primus, the weapon or the knowledge. A choice he has to make. Unfortunately, Hot Rod goes for a third-party choice that ends up affecting nothing. Grimlock meets with the other Dinobots, who don't really care about his plans or motivations for what he did. His betrayal was too much. Hot Rod selects the Covenant to get some answers, seeing a vision of early Cybertronians, Primus's first effort in creating life, turning on each other. Primus decided to call a do-over, but his attempt at purging the early Cybertronians failed, and many survived in the depths. As such, Hot Rod then selects the sword, seemingly to finish the job. An attack by Scorponok's forces gets the Dinobots to work together again, and they meet up with some of the remaining Autobots to plan their counterattack. Hopefully use the gene key to reset those changed back to the good guys. Although that might be too late, since the team returning from Earth are about to be blasted by the planetary defenses under Scorponok's control, leading us into issue 90. Hot Rod doesn't stab the early Cybertronian, but rather pontificates. This then is the decree and judgment of Primus. No parking on Sundays. You and your kind in this imperfect form must be purged, the slate wiped clean in readiness for a new and better evolution. Not so much extinction as natural selection. Natural selection is a weird way to describe a race of robot people getting exterminated because their god was upset that they got into fights with each other. However, Hot Rod rejects this. He's not Primus and frankly is disgusted that what they knew of their own history was a lie, based on a mistake that Primus made to kill living beings just because they didn't meet up with his expectations. As far as he's concerned, these beings are just as much Cybertronians as the Autobots and Decepticons, and he'll return when he finds a way to help them. In the meantime, Grimlock and his forces take control of the Civil Defense Hub and secure the data that will hopefully build new bodies for the Dinobots. Most of the Decepticon forces going to Scorponok to watch the Grand Epiphany. Back on Earth, the destruction of the Ark's AI has woken Shockwave, who helps Starscream get his speech and cognitive functions back online. Shockwave doesn't have full control over the Ark, so it's going to need a pilot. Like Starscream. You know, aside from some talk of undermining Shockwave when he was missing, I don't think Starscream has ever betrayed him in this continuity either. Maybe he just found a leader he actually liked. Grimlock makes an attack at Scorponok's position and gets blasted, forcing him to activate the gene key early. While the team at the hub take down the missiles intended for the returning wreckers, the gene key is activated, but but it instead restores everyone to normal. As part of Grimlock's plan, he didn't really use the gene key on Perceptor, instead telling him what was up and how he needed to sabotage Scorponok's plans. Scorponok and Grimlock fall over the edge of a pit to the horror of the Dinobots. Meanwhile, Optimus Prime, who has been traveling to the Ark the last few issues, reaches it as it takes off. Issue 91 begins the next storyline, Destiny. While Bludgeon shows Soundwave the effectiveness of his drones, Cybertron is not in great shape. Cleanup is underway, but Perceptor points out that things are a bit messed up for people. Their moral compasses were switched off, their darkest impulses and thoughts made manifest, and enjoying that darker side. Switching all that back on again is going to have consequences for the populace. And then, in the cold, sober light of day, suddenly coming face to face with every corrupt deed, every depraved thought, and wondering which is the real me. Give him the day off and a week's supply of coffee. Same treatment for college students who've been drinking and partying at a rave the night before. Yeah, on a more serious note of it, some are lashing out in minor fights, but others, despite not being in control of their faculties, want to be arrested and tried for war crimes. They're that disturbed by what happened. They also sent forces to Nebulos to try to help the people there, and yeah, the entire population was under mind control for a while, so they're all suffering from post-traumatic shock. Ultra Magnus, he's been a supporting character during all this, contacts Prime on Earth and fills him in, also mentioning Hot Rod's plans to go and reunify with the primordial Cybertronians. Magnus thinks that he's just not ready for this job. Optimus disagrees, thinking that stepping outside popular opinion is the first step to becoming a true leader. I think prioritizing something that can wait while you work on stabilizing the ongoing situation and giving deeply unpopular and awful orders is actually a sign of a bad leader, Optimus. Hot Rod explains to Cup that this has to take priority, that his presence in the tunnels seemed to awaken some kind of rage in the primordial Cybertronians that, if not quelled, will rise up and destroy them all. He also explains that the visions he's been having may not be of Cybertron's past, but its future. Hot Rod tries to explain all this to the populace, but they're pissed, someone even lobbing a grenade at him. Hot Rod, welcome to the wonderful world of politics! Cup recommends to Hot Rod that he's just not ready and is not in a position to reassure people, and that it might be best to just yield command over to Ultra Magnus. However, the Dinobots arrive and want to join Hot Rod in his next expedition into the tunnels, partly to protect him, but also because they think Grimlock is still alive, mostly out of faith. Hot Rod is inspired by their faith and tells Ultra Magnus to pool all resources into fixing the city while he's gone. Meanwhile, in the depths of space, another Cybertronian force examines the handiwork of Bludgeon's drones and reports back to its leader, G-Axis. Just watch, even though he's been vaporized, we're still somehow gonna get Generation 2 Megatron next. Issue 92 begins with Optimus going to see Spike, and getting blasted. He's only stopped from killing Prime by the other humans, who say that he doesn't get to make unilateral decisions for them. They'll hear out whatever Prime has to say, vote on it, and then maybe kill their ally. The system works! We soon learn that there's more to the civil unrest than just the gene key. Soundwave has been pumping a subsonic irritant through the intracom communication frequencies shared by all Cybertronians. It's just annoying people without them realizing it, putting them on edge. The only one who realizes something is up is the restored Blaster, but the Autobots can't be certain that he's actually picking something up, since the Nucleon had affected him by making him overly sensitive to sound. Soundwave picks up his eavesdropping and dispatches forces to kill Blaster, while back on Earth, Optimus proposes to the humans that instead of getting help from Cybertron, they could unite with the Nebulans, help each other out of their respective situations, especially since their advanced technology would be a major boon. Blaster takes down his attackers, but we soon realize that this was either their plan all along, or at least a convenient bonus. The Autobots shut down the intercom for maintenance, and the populace starts to calm again, but this required them to take down a lot of their long-range communication and warning systems, meaning they won't detect the approaching Ark or War World. Plus, the internet's out, so streaming services and video games are down, and everybody's really bored. In issue 93, Shockwave and Starscream finally eject Galvatron from the Ark and fly off, while Galvatron is pulled into the atmosphere. Back on, or rather under, the surface, Hot Rod's team locates the chamber housing Primus's head, and Hot Rod has a vision of himself from other series in the franchise. The primordial Cybertronians start coming out of the walls to attack our heroes, forcing them to retreat deeper into the tunnels until they find piles of corpses of long-dead Transformers, as well as Grimlock, who's being possessed by Primus.
I thought in time! We spoke. Me was Grimlock. Now me Godlock!
Up in space, our poor beloved UFO transformer, Cosmos, who I have not named until this point because it wasn't relevant to do so, because the point is, if the Transformers are mostly disguises on Earth, why was he shaped like a UFO? Is running a patrol, but sadly is destroyed by the arrival of Warworld. Ultra Magnus is unable to start coordinating their forces though, because Galvatron has found him and makes his attack, assuming that he'd be in command if Prime was gone, which is kind of odd since in his timeline it was Rodimus Prime who had been in charge, and subsequently killed by him. I don't know, it's apparently a Marvel UK thing. After an intense fight between Galvatron and Ultra Magnus, Warworld unleashes the drones. They're powered by Matrix energy from Thunderwing's body, which makes them formidable, plus they have adaptive and regenerative capabilities from alien technology. But Perceptor has analyzed them and realized that Warworld needs to stay in close proximity to work, so their real target is the Warworld itself. Meanwhile, Primus tells Hot Rod about how he exists across all of space and time and can't really die in the traditional sense. He tells Hot Rod that he's been chosen to be a Prime, and needs to be shown the true threat they all face, pulling him into an extra-dimensional realm known as Zero Space. Primus vanishes, leaving Grimlock's body behind. And while all this is going on, Blaster has tracked down Soundwave to confront him and end his part in all this. And if they destroy each other, this might finally be what we've been building up to for so long. The birth of new Soundwave! Naturally, we go from issue 94 to issue 0. Appropriately for this number, we're in Zero Space. It shows Hot Rod visions of the past, first bits from a Marvel UK issue regarding the dark matrix energy Thunderwing possessed, then the formation of the Underbase itself, originally begun with 5 of Cybertron's most intelligent beings uploading their knowledge into a single database. Among them was G-Axis, who killed the others and took the initial knowledge of the Underbase. He was frustrated with Cybertron's isolationism and decided to create his own empire, deleting knowledge of his existence from all records and memory in the process. After that, the fate of Buster and his girlfriend Jessie, killed by Megatron's army in his takeover of Earth, as he desperately called Spike to get him to resume his duties as Fort Max. He's also killed by Ratbat in a car wash.
This is bad comedy.
Yeah, this seems wrong in my opinion, especially since I think the car wash of doom is just fun fluff. Twisting it like this is unnecessarily cruel. In a vision of an alternate reality, Rodimus Prime fights Galvatron on Junkion. He's struck down, his version of the Matrix falling away, right into Hot Rod's hands. He takes it and transforms into Rodimus, emerging back in their reality in front of Bludgeon, who is about to kill Cup. In issue 95, we see the lead up to that. Cup and the Wreckers managing to infiltrate the war world. Down in the Primus chamber, Grimlock regains consciousness and, much like in the movie with the Sharktacons, quickly gets the primordial Cybertronians to halt their attack. A green mist soon seeping into old Gosei's head on the wall. Even turns his eyes green.
Well, suddenly I have a refreshing mint flavor.
While the Wreckers get their asses kicked by Bludgeon, the battle on the surface soon turns to the side of good, as the Dinobots lead the primordial Cybertronians in fighting the drones. While Rodimus makes his appearance as per the 0th issue, Blaster and Soundwave have their own fight.
Your problem, Blaster? You lack finesse. To you, acoustics is a sledgehammer, when the real art lies in obfuscation and misdirection.
All talk, no shock.
But no, Blaster manages to take him down just as Rodimus successfully defeats Bludgeon. Bludgeon this whole time has been talking about how he knows he'll die in this battle, atonement for his retreat back on Clo.
Then you are the one, my glorious demise, my immortality!
Said glorious demise is Rodimus tossing him out a window and he burns up in the atmosphere. Well, look at it this way, Bludgeon. With the flames of the atmosphere all around you, you probably look like Ghost Rider right before you hit the ground. Having been goaded on by Shockwave, Starscream flies the Ark in and blasts the war world, leading our heroes to victory. Now I just imagine Starscream riding out on the top of the Ark like Loki in Thor Ragnarok.
Autobots! I, Starscream, am your savior and new leader!
Thus we arrive at the final arc of Regeneration One, the war to end all wars. Cleanup continues, again, They find Bludgeon, shockingly still alive, though clearly in pain. He begs to be killed, but Rodimus thinks there's no more fitting a punishment for what he's done than to deny him his glorious death. I mean, half his face is missing and he's got a bunch of rocks sticking out of him. I'm pretty sure we passed glorious and just are in the middle of make it stop. Primus showed Rodimus in the 0th issue 4 distinct anomalies that will endanger them that have to be dealt with. Galvatron, who disappeared after the battle, G-Axis, the Dark Matrix creature, and Spike Witwicky. Spike himself is pretty pissed that the other humans agreed to the Nebulos plan, since it'll involve building a space bridge, and his resentment of the Transformers is almost at circuit breaker levels. Our heroes locate Galvatron, but he's soon aided by the possessed acolytes of Unicron that had shown up right before the Planet Eater arrived, whisking Galvatron away. On Nebulos, they begin their procedure to finally complete Fortress Maximus's new body. But apparently the Venom symbiote hitched a ride from back in the 3rd issue, since it comes out of nowhere and infects his head. And just to make things better, G-Axis arrives in a huge ship and a massive army.
My name is G-Axis. I come in peace. You can tell how happy I am about peace by this smile on my face.
In issue 97, they invite G-Axis down to talk, hopefully glean some information out of him. On Earth, work finishes up on the space bridge.
Is Senior Scientist Bork still with you?
Nope, he's back at the Technodrome. Krang showed up, said his warranty is still good on the thing, and we're effecting repairs. Fortress Maximus is brought back online, and while momentarily he's aware that something's infected him, he soon says everything is fine. Back on Cybertron, Rodimus just flat out says, "Hey, you've been gone for millions of years, and Primus said you're gonna be a problem." Few diplomatic conversations begin with, "God himself told us we should fear you. What's that about?" G-Axis is rather calm about the whole thing, basically stating that gods like Primus are just as fallible as any living being, and thinks the grand plan is bullcrap. Instead, he went out to create cosmic order by forming the Cybertronian Empire, terraforming planets to resemble Cybertron, and then connecting them as we see here. He calls it the Hub Network, and he's come to ask Cybertron to join it. Rodimus has already figured out, though, that a lot of these worlds already had life on it, and G-Axis is sticking with his Gen 2 version of not giving a rat's ass about organic life. And he's not taking no for an answer. Rodimus tries to attack G-Axis, but he'd absorbed part of the underbase back when it was first being formed. Even at that early stage, a small bit of its power made G-Axis more than a match for Rodimus. While all this has been happening, G-Axis's forces deliberately went after the primordial Cybertronians and tried to kill them, the Dinobots standing in their way, but heavily damaged in the fight. And over with the Ark, hiding in an asteroid field, Starscream seems to recognize G-Axis, saying that he was one of us, one of the 5, and that there shall be a reckoning. I'm just going to assume that dying and being resurrected so many times just makes Starscream so powerful he's channeling ancient spirits or something. In issue 98, believing they found a way to destroy G-Axis's hub network, our heroes stage an attack on it. It does not go well. G-Axis left it as bait and had already anticipated this possibility of an attack, so now he demands total surrender from Rodimus or they'll all be eradicated. Naturally, he surrenders. Things are not much better on Earth. The space bridge is finished, but Fort Max is the one who comes through, blasts Prime, and takes Spike back through, and Spike's in a state of shock upon seeing the guy. Starscream, in the meantime, or whoever is possessing him, builds a new body for Shockwave to assist him. Down in the Primus chamber, the acolytes of Unicron get all their energy sucked up into a now very angry-looking Primus head. In our penultimate issue, Spike is brought into Zero Space, where the force behind Fort Max explains that he's the perfect trinity of human, Nebulan, and Cybertronian mixed into one, and thus he'll be the way to launch this creature into the multiverse. Of course, this is their tie-in to Into the Spider-Verse. They're gonna get the Spider-Man from issue 3 back. While most of Rodimus's forces have been captured, the Wreckers are doing what their name implies, hit-and-run attacks on the hub to smash it. Meanwhile, Starscream and Shockwave have also arrived at the hub covertly, and we quickly get an idea of what's going on as our traitorous pal turns gold and flies off, declaring itself to be the Underbase. Yep, it seems that the memories of the other 4 that formed the original Underbase were still present in Starscream's form and have empowered him, using him to get to G-Axis while Shockwave runs interference by blowing up more stuff. They're still pissed about what happened millions of years ago, and as such have decided to drain Geaxis's intelligence into them. Rodimus frees the others and contacts the Wreckers to coordinate escape. Shockwave, armed with his own power and that of the Ark, helps completely destabilize the hub while taking Starscream's body away. But back on Cybertron, the dark matrix energy, the last piece of this puzzle, makes itself known on the surface, leading into the final issue of Regeneration One. Number 100 in a 4-issue limited series. Although, is that still the case when you had to actually rename your book into Regeneration One to make it a distinct limited series on its own? Rodimus's forces return to Cybertron and find it, well, it's hard to describe exactly, decayed maybe, and devoid of life. Rodimus realizes that the visions from Primus he was receiving weren't from him at all, but rather the dark, corrupted Matrix energy. It deliberately provoked him into attacking Geaxis and keeping him away from the planet while it did this. To be fair,
To be fair.
To be fair.
To be fair, Geaxis was a major threat, and your actions completely annihilated his millions of years of planning in a day, so you can't say it wasn't at least productive. They're attacked by pencil scribbles that were once Transformers, corrupted by the dark matrix energy. The group are saved by the Dinobots, Grimlock having been thankfully immune to conversion thanks to briefly being a host. Galvatron also took control of the space bridge controls, isolating Cybertron, but keeping the one between Earth and Nebulos active. Rodimus, in his visions, saw the multiverse and is reminded of the Trinity, a set of planets that supposedly hold the key to the multiverse. Earth, Nebulos, and Cybertron, and he needs to investigate further. Ultra Magnus is sent to deal with Galvatron, who has been let loose on Nebulos, while Rodimus enters Zero Space using the Sword and the Covenant of Primus, confronting the Dark Matrix energy. The energy explains to Rodimus how it went through all this, deliberately fanning the flames of rebellion and various factions like Scorponok, feasting on chaos and disorder. Basically, it's been the puppet master behind the scenes for Regeneration One. It creates a vision of 3 different forms of Optimus Prime to beat up Rodimus, while also torturing Spike, sending him visions of his brother and father to get him to unleash the energy he needs to enter the multiverse. Still, Rodimus takes advantage of that to summon help, sending the Covenant of Primus through the portal he's making, and summoning Rodimuses throughout the multiverse to come to the rescue. This is not the continuation of Marvel's Exiles that I was expecting. While Galvatron and Fort Max get dealt with, Rodimus convinces Spike to let go of his bitterness and hatred, honor his family, and close off the portal, trapping the Dark Matrix energy in Zero Space. Rodimus returns to Cybertron along with the real Optimus, who apparently had been taken by the energy somehow, I don't know, and he dies, thanking Rodimus as he turns grayscale. Doing this, though, cut off the Marvel continuity from the rest of the multiverse. Our epilogue brings us to Rodimus Prime in the distant future, now the last Autobot in existence. He narrates what happened next, them needing to abandon Cybertron to keep the Trinity of Worlds from interacting with the multiverse again, helping the humans and Nebulans unite and create a thriving new society. The Transformers went out to spread peace instead of conflict throughout the universe. Even Shockwave and Starscream seem to have been changed and been made better from all these experiences. I bet those 2 kids finally got married. They even got a dog! Cat. When did Ravage come back? Rodimus collapses and dies, but back on Cybertron, in an earlier issue, we had seen the primordial Cybertronians had gone into some kind of weird cocoon state before the Dark Matrix energy consumed everything. And now they emerge as this silhouetted figure, who's apparently Botanica from Beast Machines, but I don't know why anyone would assume that. Regeneration One overall is pretty dang good, but it is a lot. I actually thought this episode might be shorter since I was only really talking about 30 comics instead of 40, but here we are. There are so many elements at play, so much stuff revived for this that it just hits the ground running and never stops. And yet, while it is a bit draining, it's actually paced fairly well and has plenty of great characterization, moments to reflect, and awesome fight scenes. It calls back to a lot of stuff, and while it's sad that Andrew Wildman didn't do the pencils on all the books, the artwork was consistently pretty damn good. I do feel there was some stuff that could have probably used more build-up, like Geaxis, the point of the primordial Cybertronians, and the Dark Matrix itself, but it doesn't really need it. You get the idea of everything that happens. At some points, it seems like, as a sequel series, it feels the need to call back to everything that happened in the original book, and yet I get the idea that it's trying to bring a sense of finality to this continuity, and I'm okay with that. And there are a lot of things I love about this continuity, especially the earlier Marvel books. One of the problems of the animated series was that for a franchise whose tagline is robots in disguise, they didn't actually do the disguise stuff that often, especially as the series progressed and they needed to introduce new elements and characters and complex parts. The Autobots were just friendly with Earthlings and did stuff with them. The Marvel book? That tension between humanity and the Autobots meant that for a lot of the run, they were in disguise, trying to hide, trying to help whenever they could. Even when they had human allies and friends, their disguise element remained even to the Underbase saga, when Jesse carried Blaster in on the vacation. And indeed, those human characters were used so effectively. No one was annoying, and it was a delight to see them just as much as the Transformers. It's just been such a wild ride from start to finish. Pretty much all my other retrospectives ended with me hoping for a continuation, mostly because they ended on such a low note or they had been mishandled for so long, but not this stuff. Generation 2 was not good, but even that ending still felt satisfactory. From the original to Gen 2 to Regeneration 1, this story has been a long one, but truly fulfilling and enjoyable. It's a saga that spans decades that, as I said, touches on war, horror, spiritualism, hope, and evil. It's what makes the Transformers such a good franchise, and I'm glad I got a chance to dive deep into it all again. Just as it was as a teenager curious about the Great War that Beast Wars mentioned all the time. And it sure as hell was great. Next time, we celebrate some more Star Trek with a look at an old Gold Key issue. We're not done with Transformers this year, but we'll get to that eventually. For now, though, seek out this series if you can. Until the day when all are one.
Yeah, not like that!
Darn those Decepticons that do anything to satisfy their own needs.
But today, it's gonna be the Trash Compactor! Ooh! Ah! Ooh! My mummy fell out. This is kind of a problem. Fix that later.
Listen carefully. After many stellar cycles of patient preparation, I am mostly ready to avenge our humbling defeat on Klo. I have the substantive means to strike back, but a key element remains elusive.
I'm the ninja consultant for the Decepticons.
Hello, my friends. Please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and click the bell for notifications on new video releases. If you'd like to support future videos, you can check out my Patreon or purchase a t-shirt via Teespring or Shark Robot. Thanks for watching!